Welcome back to Paranormal M. Tonight, if you're still awake, dim the lights, put on your headphones, and let me tell you about a few strange things. And if you've ever experienced anything unusual yourself, feel free to send it my way. I'd love to share your story here. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Thank you so much, and good night. I've spent a lot of nights outdoors over the years, and a good number of them were solo. I've camped alone in all kinds of places without ever really feeling shaken. So when this happened, it stood out in a way I still can't fully explain. This was up in Little Cottonwood Canyon near Secret Lake. Beautiful place, really beautiful. The kind of place you'd normally expect to feel peaceful the second you get there. But for me, and later for my sister and a few friends too, that area carried this strange feeling that I've never felt anywhere else. It started one evening when I got a text from some friends saying they were heading up to Secret Lake. I'd never been there before, but I figured I'd meet them up there. I was delayed a bit at home, so they got a head start and I drove up after them. I parked lower down than I should have, though I didn't realize that at the time, so I ended up adding extra distance to the hike. When I started out, there were still a few people on the trail, but before long, it was just me. The sun was dropping fast, and I kept thinking, it's fine, I hike fast, I'll catch them. I was texting my sister for updates, but service was spotty. A message would come through here and there. She told me they were almost at the lake, so I picked up my pace. Then I started jogging. Then really jogging, because all of a sudden I realized how low the light was getting. At the same time, my phone battery started draining way faster than I expected. It dropped from around 30% to the teens in what felt like no time. I'd been listening to something on my phone while hiking, so I shut everything off to save what was left. And that was right around when the feeling started. At first it was subtle, just this heavy sense of being alone. But not regular alone. I've been alone on trails plenty of times. This was different. It felt bigger than that. It felt like I wasn't just alone on the mountain. It felt like I was alone in the entire world. That sounds dramatic, I know. But that's honestly the closest way I can describe it. The higher I got, the stronger it became. It was like the whole world had emptied out. No people, no animals, no life anywhere. Just me, on this mountain, in some strange, silent version of Earth. And the wind made it worse. It wasn't even particularly strong, but it felt wrong somehow. Not like weather. More like a message. Like the wind itself was reminding me that everything around me was empty. I remember pulling out my phone to text my sister again and seeing that it had died. That hit me harder than it normally would have. It was getting colder too, and I was underdressed. Just a t-shirt, no real layers for what the temperature was becoming. The evening light had turned that deep blue color where you suddenly realize you're losing visibility fast. I pressed the power button one more time, almost out of habit, and somehow the phone flickered back on. It had maybe 1 or 2% left. I called my sister. It rang and rang, but she didn't answer. Then I saw she had sent me a picture. It was a photo of one of my friends, I'll call him Mason, sitting on a rock overlooking the canyon, smiling. Totally ordinary picture. But looking at it in that moment gave me the strangest feeling. It felt impossibly far away. Like it hadn't been taken on that same mountain an hour earlier, but somewhere completely unreachable. Like it had come from another world. So I started running harder, staring at that picture, trying to memorize the rocks and the angle and the background so I could find them. When I finally reached the lake, the sun had already dropped behind the mountains. The stars were starting to show in the water, and I was scanning the whole shoreline for them. No one was there. That was the point where the feeling got overwhelming. I started calling out for my sister and my friends. No answer. Then I started yelling, really yelling, running around the lake, calling their names over and over. Nothing came back. No voices, no movement, nothing. At that point, I bailed. I just turned and ran back down the trail, trying to make it to my car before it went fully dark. My phone was dead for good by then, so I had no light. Eventually, it got black enough that I had to slow down and feel each step so I wouldn't roll an ankle. Then, about halfway down, I found them. They were fine. Totally fine. Relief hit me immediately, but that feeling didn't leave with the relief. It stayed with me. A few months later, that same group decided to camp, and I picked that area again because it was familiar and easy for everyone. The second we got near the lake, that same feeling dropped onto me all over again. And this time, I wasn't alone. I was with people I trusted, laughing, setting up camp, doing normal camping stuff, and still, it felt like I was the only person alive. That was what made it even stranger. I also started feeling kind of sick, just generally off. The wind that night wasn't anything special. Most people would have called it calm. Just a light breeze brushing against the tent. But every tiny movement of the tent fabric made me feel this deep dread. It's hard to explain. It felt like the emptiness was pressing in through the wind itself. The next morning, my sister told me she'd felt it too. She said from the moment we got there, she felt this horrible anxiety and this strange, soul-deep isolation, like all warmth and all human closeness had been stripped away. Later, when I asked her about it again, she described it in a way that stuck with me. She basically said that when you're scared or sick or even miserable, you can usually still picture comfort somewhere. Home, childhood, other people, even strangers. But this was different. This felt like there was no somewhere else, just you. And that was exactly it. She went on to describe how even though the place overlooked a resort and cabins and signs of civilization, it still felt emotionally and psychologically far away from all of it. Not physically remote, just removed. As if the hill where we camped was cut off from everything warm and human. She talked about the cold too. Not just normal cold, but this strange kind that didn't seem to match her gear or the actual temperature. She had good equipment, enough layers, a solid sleeping bag, all of that. But none of it seemed to touch the feeling. She said she lay there awake in the dark with the wind outside, and all she could think about was the warmth of humanity itself. Cities, homes, lamps glowing in windows, people going about ordinary life. Not in some poetic way, but in a very real, almost desperate way. Like she was aching for proof that people existed. That really got to me, because it matched what I had felt almost exactly. She said what scared her most wasn't the dark itself, or the mountain, or even the isolation in a normal sense. It was the absence of that basic human feeling we all carry around without noticing. That sense that somewhere, people are near, life is happening, warmth exists. Up there, she said, it felt violently gone. And honestly, that's about as close as I can get to describing it too. Even later, when we looked back at photos from that trip, something about them felt off. Not fake, not supernatural exactly, just distant. Still, lifeless in a way the place shouldn't have felt. Especially considering how many people were actually nearby, and whatever that feeling was up there, it felt like the complete absence of it. I still don't know what to call that experience. I don't know if it was psychological, environmental, something about altitude, the timing, the cold, the wind, or just one of those rare places that hits your brain in the wrong way. But I know I wasn't the only one who felt it, and I know I've never felt anything else quite like it before or since. I was about 11 when I saw something I still can't explain, and honestly, I've never forgotten it. At the time, I'd been living for maybe close to a year in this quiet little coastal town, tucked between steep hills and the ocean. It was the kind of place that felt peaceful almost all the time, especially in the early evening. One night, just before sunset, I was heading out to walk to the corner bakery. Our street was a dead end, really small, with only a handful of houses on it, and an empty patch of land right across from our gate. The moment I stepped outside and closed the gate behind me, I stopped cold. There, moving slowly across that empty lot, was this glowing white ball of light. It was about the size of a small orange, maybe a little bigger than a tennis ball. And what struck me right away was how smoothly it moved. It wasn't wobbling, flickering, or darting around like a bug or a flashlight beam. It just floated, calmly, deliberately, like it knew exactly where it was going. I stood there completely still, just staring. The light drifted upward until it was maybe 8 or 10 feet off the ground, close to the level of the power lines, and then it glided out from the lot and toward the entrance of the street. When it got there, it turned around and traced almost the exact same path back again. Then it slipped into the empty lot and disappeared. The whole thing probably lasted less than a minute, but it felt strangely clear, like every second of it stamped itself into my memory. And the oddest part is, I wasn't scared. Not at all. I remember just standing there thinking, what on earth is that? That was it. No panic. No urge to run. Just pure confusion and awe. I knew it wasn't a firefly, and it definitely wasn't anything ordinary. The way it moved felt too controlled, too intentional. Even as a kid, I could tell I was looking at something I'd never seen before. Now I'm in my 30s, and I can still picture it perfectly. The soft white glow, the size of it, the way it floated through the air so quietly and so precisely. Time has not blurred that memory at all. And to this day, I still have no idea what I saw that evening. So I'm Myra, and I grew up in a 2-story terrace house with my family. We've lived there for years, and for almost as long as I can remember, strange things have been happening around us. The first thing started when I was still pretty young, sometime in the early 2010s. Because our houses are built so close together, it's normal to hear noise from the neighbors now and then. But the house on our right was different. It had been empty for ages. The front patch was overgrown, the gate always looked untouched, and the whole place felt abandoned. Then, every so often, usually around dusk, we'd hear it. Just one marble. It would sound like a single marble hitting the floor and bouncing over and over again. Not every day, but often enough that it stayed with you. At first, I brushed it off. I thought maybe something was falling over next door, or maybe I was imagining it. But after a while, everyone in my family noticed it too. We never really sat down and talked about it properly, though. It was more like one of those things we all heard, but no one wanted to be the first to say out loud. I remember one time, when I still didn't really understand how unsettling it was, I grabbed a marble from my toy box and sat near the wall we shared with that house. When the sound from next door stopped, I bounced my own marble back against the floor, almost like I was answering it. And I still remember what happened next. The marble sound from the other side suddenly came back louder, faster, harder, like it was reacting to me. At the time, I laughed. I was a kid. I thought it was funny. But that sound stayed with us for years. It went on for nearly a decade. The only time it ever stopped was when someone finally bought the empty house and moved in. For a while, everything was quiet. Then a few years later, the house was abandoned again, and the marble came back. Only this time, it got worse. It was no longer just coming from the empty house beside us. Sometimes my family would hear it from upstairs, sometimes from the ceiling. Sometimes it would happen when only one person was alone in a room, like it wanted to be noticed. I spend most of my time away now because I stay in my college dorm, but every now and then I'd get a call from home, and one of my siblings or my parents would bring it up again, frustrated and shaken, like, "It happened last night," or "We heard it again." But the most frightening experience happened recently. It was late on a Saturday night. My sister Maris was in her bedroom just scrolling on her phone, minding her own business. Then she heard the sound again. Not from outside, not from the ceiling, not from somewhere far off in the house, right in front of her bedroom door. She said it sounded exactly like someone had dropped a single marble onto the floor just outside and let it bounce there. She froze. Then she rushed to lock her door and turned all her lights on. She stayed like that until the sound finally stopped. The next morning, all of us ended up talking about it. And that was when it got even worse, because everyone had heard it too. My parents heard it outside their room. My brother said he heard it outside his door. Even though their rooms are spaced apart across the hallway, they all said the same thing. It sounded like the marble was right there, directly in front of them, loud and clear, as if someone had thrown it down just outside each door. We still haven't done anything about it. I guess, in a strange way, we've made an unspoken agreement with whatever it is. As long as it doesn't show itself, and as long as it doesn't actually hurt anyone, we just keep living with it. We stay quiet. We pretend we can handle it. Because when you hear a single marble bounce in an empty place where no one should be, over and over again for years, eventually, you start to wonder whether something in that house has been listening the whole time. I should probably start by saying this up front. I know how this sounds. If someone else told me this story, I'd probably try to explain it away too. Stress, grief, anxiety, lack of sleep, all of that makes sense. And honestly, part of me still wants to believe that's all this is. But what makes it hard to dismiss is that strange things have followed me for most of my life, long before any of this happened. So, a few years ago, when I was 16, my dad's mother passed away in late winter. I had gone to see her a few days before, and later I was told I was the last person to really talk to her and hold her hand. That stayed with me. It was comforting in one way, but it also hurt, because her own sons, my dad and my uncle, should have been the ones there for her more. I went to the funeral, stood beside her casket, and said goodbye the best I could. For a while, that was that. Sad, but normal. Just grief. Then, about a year later, my mom, my younger brother, and I moved into this old house way out in rural Indiana. From the beginning, I hated it. I couldn't explain why exactly, but it felt too familiar in all the wrong ways, like the house I grew up in, the one where I'd had experiences as a kid that I still can't fully explain. At first, it was subtle. I'd get this constant feeling that something was watching me from the closet or from the doorway. My pets wouldn't come into my room once it got dark, which was weird because they usually followed me everywhere. I'd lie awake half the night for no reason at all, or I'd wake up suddenly like something had jolted me out of sleep. Sometimes, when I was home alone, I'd hear my name, clear as day. I tried to be rational about it. My family was putting a lot of pressure on me about school and my future, and I figured maybe my mind was just under too much strain. It didn't help that I spent way too much time reading creepy stories and watching horror movies. I kept telling myself that was all it was. But it didn't stay small. Whatever that feeling was, it started seeming closer, nearer to my bed, nearer to me. I got so scared of being alone at night that I stopped sleeping in my room and started making a spot for myself on the floor in my mom's room instead. My Aunt Kira suggested we take pictures around the house just to see if anything showed up. In a few of them, there were these little floating lights, probably dust, maybe not, I don't know. But then there was one photo of me sitting on the couch. It was taken right around the anniversary of my grandmother's death. My mom snapped it while I was just sitting there, and when we looked at it later, there was a face in the reflection of the window behind me. Not just any face, it looked so much like my grandmother. Clear enough that all of us just froze. It looked like she was standing behind me, watching me. At the time, that actually comforted me. We all thought maybe it was her checking in, making sure I was okay. She loved me, and that explanation felt gentle. It felt safe. I wanted to believe that. But then last fall, everything started up again. And this time it felt different. I got desperate enough that I asked Aunt Kira to do a pendulum reading for me. I know not everyone believes in that, and I'm not saying you have to. I'm just telling you what happened and what I was told. According to her, whatever this is had attached itself to me back in that house in Indiana years ago. She said it watches me constantly, that it messes with things because it wants my attention. And the part that really got to me was this. She said it isn't my grandmother. Not even close. She said whatever I'm dealing with wants me to know it's there, that it follows me everywhere. And I'm being honest with you, I am deeply, genuinely scared. She gave me a protective stone and told me to pray. I'm not really a religious person, but I was willing to try anything. I put the stone above my pillow one night, and almost immediately, I felt this crushing pressure on my chest. I got sick right after, physically sick, like my whole body was rejecting something. The last big thing happened at work. I was in the stockroom, just doing my job, and I saw it. Not fully, not in a way I could point to and prove, but enough. It was there in the corner, still and watching, like it wanted me to notice it, like it had been waiting for me to look up. And that's where I am now. I honestly can't tell anymore what's real and what's anxiety. Maybe I'm unraveling. Maybe grief and fear have just tangled themselves together so tightly that I can't separate them. Or maybe something really has been with me all this time. I don't know. I just needed to say it out loud, exactly as it happened, because keeping it to myself has been eating at me. And right now, more than anything, I'm just waiting, wondering what it's going to do next. So, I had the strangest moment on the Stockholm subway today, and honestly, I still can't stop replaying it in my head. I'm not here to say it was something paranormal, and I'm not saying it was nothing either. I really don't know what to make of it. I just know it left me with this weird, lingering feeling I can't quite explain. I was sitting on the train with my friend when this older man came over and sat beside us. He looked completely ordinary at first glance. Nicely dressed, very composed, soft-spoken, and sharp. He had this thoughtful, almost lecturer-like presence about him. Nothing chaotic, nothing off. He didn't seem drunk or confused or anything like that. Just calm and very intentional. He started by asking if we were Norwegian. We told him we were actually Finnish, and he smiled, apologized politely, and made a brief comment about Finland. Very normal, very friendly. Then he looked at us and said, "Can I ask you something? Do you think time moves faster inside this train than it does outside?" We kind of looked at each other and said we weren't sure. And then he started explaining relativity. Not in an over-the-top way, just very plainly, like a teacher explaining something he knew well. He said Einstein had shown that time can move differently depending on speed. Then he asked another question. He said, "True or false? Time moves faster at the top of your head than at your feet." My friend guessed true, and the man nodded. He said yes, because of gravity. The way he explained it was so matter-of-fact and confident. He clearly knew physics. At one point, he mentioned Stockholm University and gave the impression that he had spent time studying or working in that world. Then he paused and said, "Last question. If I told you I'm a time traveler, would you believe me?" We laughed a little and said no. And he just said, very calmly, "I am. I've traveled through time." That was the strange part. He didn't say it like he was trying to be funny. He didn't say it dramatically. He just said it so evenly, so casually, like he was telling us where he was from. Then he added, "A time traveler always recognizes another time traveler immediately." My friend asked him how that was even possible, how you'd recognize one. And the man said, "We've only just met, so I won't tell you yet. But when you are an old man, I'll come back and explain it to you." He said that directly to my friend, and something about the way he said it just stayed with me. We all got off at the same station a few minutes later. He didn't linger. He didn't follow us or try to keep the conversation going. He just wished us a good day and walked away at this slow, unbothered pace. And that's what's been sitting with me ever since. It's not even really the words themselves. It was the feeling of it all. He didn't come across as unstable, and he didn't feel like someone putting on a performance. He felt deeply calm, intelligent, and oddly sincere, like someone completely at ease with what he was saying. I know the most rational explanation is probably just that he was an eccentric older academic having a playful conversation. And maybe that's exactly what it was. But I don't know. The whole thing had this eerie, meaningful feeling to it, and I can't seem to shake it. This really happened to me when I was about 9 or 10, and even now, in my 20s, I still think about it all the time. What makes it even stranger is that I still have the same little ball I used to test my vision that day. I remember I was exhausted that afternoon, so I laid down for a nap. Nothing felt unusual at first, but when I woke up, I could tell right away that something was off. I wasn't scared though. I was mostly confused. The world just didn't look the way it normally did. The colors were wrong somehow. I walked out into the living room, and my dad was there, watching TV like usual. I glanced around, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, and then this very clear thought hit me. I'm seeing the way my dad sees. My dad is colorblind. He's always had trouble telling certain reds and greens apart. And somehow, for that short stretch of time, it felt like I had stepped directly into his version of the world. The clearest memory I have is of this old toy ball I had as a kid. It had bright colored sections on it, red, blue, green, and yellow. I still have it actually. That day, I picked it up and stared at it, trying to figure out what had changed. The blue was still visible, but it looked much darker than usual, almost deep navy, like it had lost all its brightness. The red was there, but only barely. It seemed faded, weak, almost washed out. The green didn't really stand out at all. It just sort of blended in and disappeared. And the yellow was the same way. It was like it had been muted so much that it barely existed. The best way I can explain it is this. It felt like someone had turned down the color in the world, but only for certain shades. Reds were dimmer. Greens and yellows seemed to vanish. Everything looked flatter, quieter. And then there was the light. That part still amazes me when I think about it. Normally, sunlight feels strong to me. Sometimes it's so bright it makes me squint right away. But that day, it didn't bother me at all. I even went outside to check. The sunlight felt strangely soft, almost distant, like it wasn't fully reaching me. The whole world seemed less intense, not just in color, but in brightness too. What's so strange is that I never felt afraid. I was curious more than anything. It felt unusual, obviously, but I was calm the whole time. I think because I was still sleepy, I eventually just laid back down and went to sleep again. A couple of hours later, I woke up and everything was normal. Completely normal. The colors were back. The light felt bright again. It was over just like that. And it has never happened again. Years later, my mom was going through old boxes and saved toys, and I found that same ball. I just stood there holding it, staring at it, remembering that afternoon so clearly. There's something about having that actual object in my hands that makes the memory feel even more real. Like it wasn't just a weird dream or something I imagined. It happened. I've had my own theory about it for a long time. Since my dad is colorblind, I've always wondered if maybe I carry something genetically connected to it, and for whatever reason, my brain sort of slipped into a different mode during that half-asleep, half-awake state. Maybe something misfired for a little while. Maybe my brain processed color differently just for those few hours. I honestly don't know. But what stayed with me most wasn't just how strange it was. It was how meaningful it felt. That's why the memory has never left me. It wasn't just bizarre. It felt personal. Almost like I'd been allowed, briefly, to step into someone else's vision, someone I loved, and come back carrying a piece of it with me. You know, looking back, I think my first truly unexplained experiences started sometime in the mid-1990s and carried on for years. At the time, I was living in this beautiful old Victorian house, well over a century old, and that was where it all began. One night, I woke up to this strange tapping sound. Not loud, but persistent enough to pull me out of sleep. When I opened my eyes, I saw what looked like a man dressed in old-fashioned clothing, older than anything from my own time, really, quietly sweeping the floor with a broom. As he moved, the broom kept knocking against the wall. I just lay there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then there was another moment in that same house that stayed with me. I came downstairs one day and found 2 kitchen knives taken out of the drawer and laid crossed over each other on the counter. I lived alone, and this was long before everything was instantly documented with a phone in your hand. You just had the experience, and then you were left with it. Later, I moved into an even older cottage, nearly 200 years old, and I lived there for about 20 years. That house had a lot going on. For a long stretch, the light bulbs in the sitting room kept blowing every few months. I had the wiring checked, had the fixtures looked at, and everything came back fine. Nothing was wrong. Then, after years of this, it suddenly stopped as mysteriously as it had started, and the problem never came back. In the bedroom, I had these window screens with pull cords, and every so often one of those cords would swing so hard it looked as though someone had yanked it. Then it would stop completely. No draft, no open window, nothing that could explain it. That same room gave me one of the worst scares I've ever had. I heard a loud breath, like someone standing close by and exhaling sharply into the room. It was so clear and so sudden that it made my whole body go cold. There were smaller things too, the kind that sound almost silly until they happen to you. One morning I came downstairs and found my shopping note, which I always kept attached to the fridge with a magnet, placed neatly on the kitchen counter. The magnet was sitting right on top of it, as if someone had carefully set it there. It hadn't just fallen. It couldn't have. And then came the moment that finally pushed me to leave. I woke up around 2 in the morning to a huge crash. A large framed picture that had been hanging securely on the wall for maybe 20 years had come down somehow. But what got me was the way it landed, face up, on the floor, with the glass shattered. That was the point where I thought, no, I'm done. I'm moving. So I did. I moved into a newer house, built in the 1970s, with no tragic history, nothing people would usually point to. I honestly thought that would be the end of it. I thought maybe the activity had been tied to the age of the homes, or whatever energy people believe old places hold on to. But it didn't stop. Not long ago, I was standing in the lounge when the TV switched on by itself. I was startled, of course, but then about 10 minutes later, I walked into the bedroom and that TV turned on too, completely on its own. It felt less like a coincidence and more like something following a pattern I still don't understand. People always say, "Why didn't you film it?" But honestly, when something like that happens, your first reaction isn't to grab your phone. You just freeze. And by the time you think to record it, it's over. The room is quiet again. The moment is gone. That's how it always seems to happen. What's left me thinking the most is this. I used to assume the strange activity was connected to the old houses. That made sense to me. But now I'm in a much newer home, and things are still happening. So I've started to wonder whether it isn't the houses at all. Maybe, somehow, it's connected to me. I'm a very sensitive person. I experience mirror pain synesthesia, so I can physically feel other people's pain in a very real way. And I've always had a high level of emotional sensitivity too. I don't say that dramatically. It's just true. So lately I found myself wondering whether that openness, that sensitivity, has anything to do with these experiences. Whether some people are just more aware of things they can't easily explain. I don't claim to have the answers. I only know what I've seen, heard, and lived through. And after all these years, I'm beginning to feel like whatever this is, it may be less about where I live, and more about me. You know, I've been thinking a lot about the house next to ours lately, and honestly, it's been unsettling in a way I can't quite shake. We live in a semi-detached house, and for years the place next door belonged to a kind Muslim woman named Nabila. She passed away in a car accident about 9 years ago, and it was really heartbreaking at the time because she and my mom were quite close. She was one of those genuinely warm people who always treated our family with kindness, so even now, there's still a certain feeling attached to that house. For a long time, nothing strange ever happened there. The downstairs had been used as a small workshop during the weekdays, with a few women coming in to work, so the house never felt completely abandoned. But the upper floor stayed locked up and empty. Then, not too long ago, Nabila's older sister, who lives in another province, arranged for some repairs to be done. People came in to treat the place for termites, clear out old cabinets and broken furniture, and in the process, parts of the ceiling upstairs were left exposed. Ever since then, things have started to feel different. Over the last couple of weeks, my family and I have been hearing odd noises coming from the second floor of that empty house. Not constantly, just every few nights. It sounds like something being dragged slowly across a wooden floor, or like objects being shifted around. Then one evening, around 7:30, all of us heard a sudden, heavy bang against the wall between our house and theirs. It was loud enough that everyone froze. My mom got worried right away and called the caretaker who lives nearby. He came over, went inside to check the place, and didn't find anyone. The only unusual thing he noticed was that one of the old glass louver windows upstairs had been left partly open, so he shut it before leaving. After that, we tried to be practical about it. We told ourselves it was probably just the wind, or maybe something disturbed during the repairs. Since the noises had only happened a few times, we thought it was better not to dwell on it. But then last night, it happened again, and this time it felt impossible to ignore. It was around 10 p.m. I was in my room scrolling on my phone, just relaxing, when I suddenly heard that same sound again from the other side of the wall. Something was moving upstairs. Not just a random creak either. It really sounded like an object being pulled or shifted, and then almost like someone rummaging through a drawer. What made it worse was this: there were no footsteps at all. That's the part that keeps bothering me. In these houses, when someone walks around on the upper floor next door, we can usually hear it clearly because the structures are connected. But this time, there was movement. There was the sound of searching or dragging, and yet not a single step. And where I live, in a big city with cameras all over the streets and outside most homes, it's hard to imagine someone sneaking in and out unnoticed, especially repeatedly. These sounds never happen during the day, only at night, and by now this has been the fourth time in about 2 weeks. Maybe there's a simple explanation. I still want to believe there is. But I can't deny that every time the house goes quiet again, the whole thing feels heavier somehow, like it's holding on to something it doesn't want to let go of. So, I teach high school, and every now and then I end up staying late to finish grading papers. The teacher's workroom is tucked at the very end of this long hallway, and once it gets past 6 in the evening, that whole part of the building just empties out completely. Usually the security officer is across campus near the auditorium, so for the most part, it's just me there by myself. A few nights ago, I was still in the office around 8:30, going through a stack of essays. Everything was really still. The only sounds were the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above me and my pen moving across the page. Then, I heard footsteps out in the hallway. Not fast, not frantic, just steady, unhurried walking. The kind of sound that makes you think someone's simply passing by on their way somewhere else. At first, I figured it had to be the security officer, so I didn't pay much attention. But then, I noticed something that felt off. I didn't hear his keys, and he almost always pokes his head in when he's doing a round near this side of the building. The footsteps came closer, then stopped right outside the door. I remember just sitting there, waiting for someone to appear in the little window or push the door open. But nothing happened. After maybe 10 seconds, I stood up and looked out into the hallway. The motion sensor lights hadn't even come on. It was completely dark and completely empty. No one there at all. I stepped out a little farther, thinking maybe somebody had just turned the corner toward the stairwell before I got there. Still nothing. At that point, I pulled out my phone and texted the security officer just to check. He wrote back almost right away and said he'd been near the auditorium the entire evening and hadn't come anywhere near my hallway. I tried to laugh it off and tell myself it was just the building settling. Older schools make all kinds of strange noises, and I know that. But when I sat back down at my desk, I heard it again. One more step. Just a single footstep. Right outside the door. And then, nothing. Complete silence. I didn't stay to finish grading after that. I gathered my things, turned off the lights, and left a lot earlier than I'd planned. So this happened when I was around 16, and honestly, it's still one of those moments I think about because I've never been able to explain it. It was pretty late, maybe close to 1 in the morning. I was sitting on the floor in my room near the door, just scrolling on my phone in the dark. The lights were off, and the only thing lighting up the room was my screen. After a little while, I heard footsteps outside my room. I figured it was probably my mom coming to check if I was still awake, so I quickly climbed into bed and pretended to be asleep. My bedroom door was locked from the inside, and the key was still in the lock on my side, exactly where I'd left it. A few seconds later, I heard 2 soft but very clear knocks on the door. I stayed completely still and didn't answer because I thought if my mom believed I was asleep, she'd just walk away. Then everything went silent. No more footsteps, no voices, nothing. I set my phone beside me on the mattress, closed my eyes, and eventually fell asleep. But the really weird part didn't happen until the next morning. When I woke up, my bedroom door was standing wide open. The key was still in the inside lock, just like it had been the night before. And that's what made no sense to me, because with the key in there, the door shouldn't have been able to be unlocked from the outside. Later, I asked my mom if she had come to my room that night, or if she'd somehow opened the door in the morning. She told me she hadn't. And then I noticed something else. My phone, the one I had left right next to me before I went to sleep, wasn't on the bed anymore. I found it under the bed, almost right in the center underneath. Not near the edge like it had slipped off, but far enough in that it looked more like someone had placed it there. For a while, I tried to come up with a logical explanation. I even wondered if maybe I'd done it in my sleep. But I've never sleepwalked in my life, not before that night and not after. And when I woke up, I was still in basically the same position I'd fallen asleep in. Even the blanket barely looked disturbed. I still can't explain what happened that night. And honestly, even now, telling it out loud still gives me chills. About a year and a half ago, I saw something that still doesn't sit right with me, and honestly, I still can't explain it. We live out in the country, where the houses are spaced pretty far apart, maybe an acre or so between most of them. Usually, I just let my dog Tucker go outside by himself at night and wait for him to come back in. But this one evening was so calm and pleasant that I decided to stay out there with him for a minute. I'd only been outside maybe half a minute when I suddenly felt this low, heavy vibration. I could hear it too, but it wasn't like it was coming from one direction. It felt like it was all around me, almost like the air itself was humming. I could feel it deep in my chest. It didn't build up or fade away. It was just there, steady and strong, for maybe 5 or 6 seconds. And then, right after that, the whole sky lit up with this intense, pinkish violet flash. It was so bright it washed over everything, like nighttime had just been flipped inside out for a second. I could tell it came from somewhere beyond the right side of my house, up in the sky. But the strange part was, there was no sound at all when it happened. None. I took off around the side of the house, hoping I'd catch whatever caused it. But by the time I got there, it was gone. Then, almost immediately, that same vibration started again. Same exact feeling, same exact hum, same length of time. I backed up under the carport because at that point I was thinking, maybe this was some kind of bizarre lightning or electrical thing. But this time, after the vibration stopped, nothing followed. No flash, no sound, just silence. I looked around right away to see if anyone else nearby might have stepped outside or noticed it too. From our place, I can only see a couple of neighboring houses, and everything looked still. No porch lights, no people, not even a car going by. That's when I realized I didn't have my phone on me, and I really wanted my wife to come outside in case it happened again. I didn't want to run inside and miss it, so I started tossing little stones up at our bedroom window to get her attention. I must have looked ridiculous, but whatever it was, it never came back. One detail that still sticks with me is our cats. We've got a couple of indoor-outdoor cats, and when they're outside, they usually couldn't care less about us. They do their own thing and only come around when they feel like it. But right after that flash, both of the cats that had been outside came straight over and stayed right by my feet. They've never done that before, and they haven't done it since. The rest of that night, I just kept saying, I have no idea what that was. And the more I thought about it, the fewer explanations made sense. It didn't seem like lightning, not anything I've ever seen or heard. There aren't any transformers or major power lines in the direction the flash came from, and even if there were, the whole thing felt way too measured, too even, too deliberate. Plus, nothing in the house flickered. No lights dimmed, no power issues, nothing. So here I am, still thinking about it all this time later, still without an answer. I've tried searching online, and that got me nowhere. If somebody's seen something like that before, I'd genuinely love to hear what you think. Because as of now, I've still got nothing. When I was about 9, this happened to me. My older brother Caleb was a couple years ahead of me, and we were both close with another set of brothers whose family had this old farm way out in the country. They had an older brother too, but he was already driving and hardly ever home, so to us, he almost felt like some distant grown-up who belonged to another world. We spent a lot of weekends out there when we were kids. On this particular night, we were staying over. My brother and his friend decided they wanted to camp out downstairs in sleeping bags, while my buddy and I got the upstairs room with the bunk beds. At first, it was the kind of night you remember fondly as a kid. We were laughing over nothing, whispering back and forth long after we were supposed to be asleep, just enjoying that strange freedom kids feel when everyone else in the house is quiet. Then, underneath our talking, I started noticing something else. At first, I didn't say anything. I listened for a minute or two, trying to tell myself I was imagining it. But it kept going. "Do you hear that?" I asked, cutting my friend off in the middle of whatever story he was telling. He got quiet for a second and then said, "The footsteps?" That was the moment my stomach dropped, because now I knew it wasn't just me. Someone was walking in the hallway right outside our bedroom door. Back and forth. Slow, steady footsteps. We were the only ones sleeping upstairs, and from the thin strip of space under the door, I could see the hallway was completely dark. I asked him if maybe his older brother had come home after all, since his room was the only other bedroom up there. But he immediately said no. He wasn't supposed to be back that night. The footsteps kept going, so I finally decided I was going to look. At that point, I still wanted a normal explanation. I figured maybe our older brothers had snuck upstairs and were trying to mess with us. I slid quietly out of bed and crept over to the door. I turned the handle as slowly as I could and waited until the footsteps moved past the room. Then I opened the door just enough to peek through the crack, hoping I'd catch whoever it was before they noticed me. I looked into the hallway. There was no one there, and the footsteps stopped instantly. That's the part that got me. There was nowhere for anyone to go, no place to duck into, no time to hide. 1 second there had clearly been someone walking right outside the door, and the next second the hallway was empty. Even then, my mind refused to accept what that meant. I told myself it had to be my brother. Somehow he'd hidden. Somehow this was still a prank. My friend didn't want to leave the room, but I convinced him to come with me just far enough to check downstairs. I told him we'd just peek into the living room. If our brothers were there asleep, then maybe that would prove it had been them in the hall earlier. And besides, the stairs were in the opposite direction from where we'd last heard the footsteps, so in my head, that made it feel safer. The staircase had a little turn in it, a few steps down to a landing, then another longer stretch into the first floor. There was a small window by the landing letting in a little moonlight, but after that, the stairs dropped into darkness. I went first. I was moving slowly, but I didn't want to stop. I still had this awful feeling that something was behind us upstairs, and I just wanted to get downstairs and figure out what was going on. When I got near the bottom, my foot touched the last step, and in that exact second, something ran right in front of me. I didn't see a body. I didn't see a shadow. I didn't see anything at all. But it passed so close that I felt the air move against me as it rushed from one side to the other. It scared me so badly, I stumbled backward into my friend, and we both went down on the stairs in a heap. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. Whatever had just passed us felt taller than I was, though at that age that wasn't saying much. Still, I knew it was there. I could feel it the way you feel somebody standing too close behind you even before you turn around. We both froze and listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No voices. No movement. Just silence. My friend had reached his limit. He immediately started backing up the stairs, wanting nothing more to do with any of it. I told him I was at least going to look into the living room before I came back up. So he retreated to the bedroom, and I stayed there on the staircase, one hand gripping the railing like it was the only safe place left in the house. I leaned out just enough to see into the living room. To my left, I could make out my brother and his friend still asleep in their sleeping bags. And that thought hit me all at once. Whatever had just run in front of us had been in that room with them. I barely had time to process that before I turned and looked toward the kitchen. There was a big window there facing out toward the yard and driveway, and the outside light illuminated the area enough that I could see clearly. That's when I saw him. An older man was walking up the driveway toward the house. He looked maybe in his 50s. He was wearing old work coveralls with stitched patches on them, worn shoes, and a faded jacket that looked like it had been used hard for years. He had on an old-fashioned cap, the kind I'd never seen anyone actually wear in real life. Over one shoulder he carried a large sack, like burlap or canvas, and even that had a patch sewn onto it. But none of that was the strangest part. The strangest part was that everything about him, his clothes, his skin, even the sack, had this soft, glowing gray look to it. Not bright, not shining like a flashlight, just this pale, unreal glow, like he was lit from somewhere that didn't belong to the world around him. I stood there staring, completely frozen. My mind just stopped working. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't trying to explain it anymore. I knew, with the kind of certainty that only comes when fear strips everything else away, that I was looking at a ghost. The spell broke all at once, and I ran. I flew back up the stairs and into the bedroom where my friend was already in his bunk. I told him what I had seen, and I remember not needing to convince him. He could hear it in my voice. He could see it on my face. After that, the whole mood of the night changed. No more whispering, no more laughter. Just silence, tension, and the desperate hope that morning would come quickly. At some point, somehow, we fell asleep. The next morning, neither of us said a word about it. We were kids. We figured nobody would believe us, especially not the younger boys. And honestly, I don't think I was ready to hear myself say it out loud. We were all sitting in the living room watching TV when their mom walked in behind us. She was one of those genuinely kind people, always patient, always smiling, the sort of person who made every room feel calmer just by being in it. But that morning, there was no smile. She looked pale, worn out, like she hadn't slept at all. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she didn't even really look at us. She just stared across the room and asked, very quietly, "Did any of you boys see someone walking around last night?" The room went still. We all just shook our heads. She didn't say anything else. She turned around and walked away, and the second she left, it all clicked for me. She hadn't asked that casually. She knew something had happened, or at the very least, she had heard or seen enough herself to ask. But I never told her what I saw. What I do know is that night changed something in me. At the time, I didn't have language for it. I just knew that the world suddenly felt bigger, stranger, and far less explainable than it had the day before. That night at the farm was the first thing that ever happened to me that I truly couldn't explain away, and it wouldn't be the last. Years have passed since then. I've had other experiences, other moments that made me question what we think is possible. But that night remains the one I always come back to. Maybe because I was so young. Maybe because it was the first crack in the ordinary world. Or maybe because some part of me is still that kid standing on the stairs, gripping the railing, staring into the dark, trying to make sense of something impossible. And even now, after all these years, telling it still makes my heart beat a little faster. So this happened a few years ago, and even now, I still don't really know what to make of it. My mom, Elaine, was first diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer in 2015. About a year later, the doctors found several lesions on her brain, and not long after that, we lost her. It all happened so fast, but at the same time, it felt like we'd been living inside that grief forever. At the time, we'd only recently moved to a little village in the Irish countryside. I still remember the morning my dad told me she was gone. It was bright and quiet, one of those strangely beautiful mornings that feels completely wrong when something awful has just happened. I went out into the back garden because I didn't know what else to do. I just sat there in shock, feeling completely numb. And while I was sitting there, I noticed something odd about my shadow. The shape of my face, just for that moment, looked exactly like my mom's. That's what unsettled me so much. I don't actually resemble her that strongly. I take after my dad more. But somehow the outline in that shadow looked so much like her that it stopped me cold. As strange as that was, it wasn't the only thing that happened that morning. A little while later, I was still outside when my dog suddenly started acting nervous, staring toward the open back door. He was clearly reacting to something, so I got up and went inside to check. Right behind the door was an empty bin, and there was this scratching sound coming from inside it. My dog wouldn't go near it. I leaned over and looked in, and at the very bottom was a tiny shrew, trapped there and scrambling around, trying to get out. Now, on its own, that might not sound especially meaningful. But my dad used to tease my mom and tell her she had a sweet little shrew nose because her nose was so small and pointed. So finding a shrew there, the very morning after she passed, felt deeply strange. What made it even weirder was that the bin was tall and completely empty. There was nothing inside it that the shrew could have climbed on, and no obvious way it could have gotten in there in the first place. I called for my dad, and he came through from the other room. He's always been gentle with animals, so he carefully lifted the little shrew out in his hands, carried it into the garden, and let it go. And that was it. But it stayed with me. So on the morning my mom died, I saw what looked like her face in my shadow, and then not long after, I found a shrew. The exact little nickname my dad had for her, trapped in a place it didn't seem like it could have gotten into on its own. We lived in the countryside, yes, and there were animals around all the time. But that is the only shrew I've ever seen there, before or since. Even now, I don't know how to explain it. I know grief can affect the way we see things, and I understand that the mind can reach for patterns when we're hurting. But even my dad, who's a very practical person and not remotely spiritual, found the whole shrew thing unsettling. I'm not saying I think my mom came back as a shrew or anything like that. I just can't shake the feeling that those moments meant something. Maybe not in a literal, supernatural way, but enough to make me feel, just for a moment, that she was still close. So, growing up, I was always moving back and forth between England and Ireland because my family was spread across both places. And no matter where we were living, there was one thing I could always count on. Sooner or later, someone in the family would decide it was time to visit a castle. Honestly, I saw so many castles as a kid that I lost track of them years ago. Most of the ones I visited in England were with my grandparents, and those were the big, impressive ones. The kind that looked like they'd been frozen in time. But once I was living in Ireland again, those outings got replaced by what my dad liked to call castle hunting. My dad, well, let's call him Declan, loved tracking down forgotten ruins out in the middle of nowhere. The thing is, I didn't really enjoy those trips as much. The places he found were usually nothing like the grand English castles I'd grown used to. A lot of them were more like old fortified manor houses or half-collapsed ruins from centuries ago. Ireland absolutely has incredible castles, of course, but many of the famous ones are either privately owned or packed with visitors. Declan preferred the lonely, overlooked places, the ones nobody else seemed interested in. One day, he found one online that was somewhere near the border of Leinster and Munster. I still can't remember exactly where it was. If I had to guess now, I'd say maybe somewhere in County Tipperary or nearby. Wherever it was, it felt completely remote. After about an hour and a half of driving, we ended up pulling over beside this quiet little field with sheep in it. And the reason we stopped there was because the ruin we were looking for was sitting right inside that field. The moment I saw it, I knew this place was different from the others we'd visited. This wasn't some tiny, underwhelming fortified house. It was a proper ruin. Tall stone walls, battered by time, with 2 round towers still standing, while the others had long since fallen away. No one had restored it. No signs, no ropes, no effort to tidy it up. It was covered in ivy and tangled vegetation, like the land was slowly reclaiming it. But somehow, that made it even more striking. We climbed into the field and started exploring, and almost right away, I noticed this opening leading into a completely dark room, or maybe a chamber, I'm not even sure. What I do remember is how black it was. I mean, truly black. I couldn't see a single thing beyond the entrance. I've always hated dark places. That kind of darkness makes my stomach turn. But standing there, I felt something I'd never felt before. I was scared, absolutely. But at the same time, I had this intense urge to go in. Not curiosity exactly. Or not just curiosity. It felt more like I was being drawn toward it. That's the only way I know how to describe it. Like something in that darkness wanted me to step forward. And as frightened as I was, the pull toward it felt just as strong. That was what unsettled me most. Usually, fear would win instantly. But this time, it was like fear and attraction were perfectly balanced. In the end, I tore myself away and kept exploring the rest of the ruin. A little later, I found another entrance. This one wasn't quite as dark at first, so I could see that it led into some kind of passage or tunnel. And the second I looked at it, that same feeling came back, that same pull. I still don't know why, but this time I actually went in. I didn't have a phone light, no torch, nothing. I just walked forward until I reached the point where the daylight faded and the darkness began. And standing right there, at the edge of what I couldn't see, I felt it again. Stronger, maybe. That horrible, compelling sense that I should keep going. Like the darkness was inviting me in, or coaxing me in. But thankfully, my fear kicked in at the last moment. I backed out, got out of that tunnel, and went to find Declan. I told him about it, and he went in with his flashlight to have a look. I stayed outside, watching the beam of light move around inside. I expected him to go much farther than I had, but after only a short while, he came back out. When I asked why he'd turned around so quickly, he told me that right where the darkness started, there was a deep hole in the ground. At the bottom were jagged stones and broken brick. I remember just staring at him, because only a few minutes earlier, I had been standing right there. 1 or 2 more steps, maybe less, and I could have fallen straight into it. And the worst part was knowing how close I'd come to giving in to that strange urge to keep walking. We stayed a little longer, wandering around the ruin, and then eventually headed back to the car. On the drive home, I asked Declan if he'd explored that first dark chamber I'd been staring at earlier. Now, my dad was never someone I thought of as fearful. He was former military, the kind of man who'd climb onto the roof without a ladder just to fix a loose tile or repaint a chimney pot. Nothing seemed to shake him. But when I asked if he'd gone into that room, he surprised me. He said no. He told me he didn't like it in there, that even with the flashlight, he'd felt too uneasy to go in properly. That answer has stayed with me almost as much as the rest of it. Because I'd been in plenty of old castles and ruins before that day, I'd seen eerie stairwells, cold stone chambers, narrow passages, all of that. But this place felt different. It didn't just feel creepy. It felt active somehow, as though it was pressing itself against my mind, trying to lure me deeper inside. And I still think about that. Was it just my imagination? Was it the atmosphere, the isolation, the darkness, the suggestiveness of the place? Maybe. That's the sensible explanation, and maybe it's the right one. But part of me still wonders, because if it was only superstition, why did it feel so strong? And why did I nearly walk straight toward a hidden drop I couldn't even see? And why did my dad, of all people, refuse to enter that first room? I did try, years later, to figure out which ruin it had been. I searched through lists and photos of lesser-known Irish castles, but nothing I found looked quite right. I even asked Declan again, hoping he might remember, but too much time had passed. He thought he might still have photos buried somewhere on an old computer, though, so maybe one day I'll finally pin it down. But until then, it stays in my mind as this one strange, unforgettable place. And even now, I can't quite decide whether that castle was just an old ruin with a dangerous tunnel, or whether, for whatever reason, it really did seem to want me inside. Let me tell you about one night I still can't fully explain. Back when I was working overnight patrol, my sergeant had this habit of keeping us moving even on the quietest shifts. He hated dead time, so he'd come up with little games for us between calls. One of his favorites was hiding a sticky note somewhere on the window or door of a random business in town and making us find it as we drove our sectors. So that night, sometime a little after 2 in the morning, I was doing exactly that, rolling slow through empty streets, checking storefronts, sweeping alley lights across buildings, looking for anything out of place. It was one of those nights where everything feels too still, and you start paying attention to every shadow, every reflection, every tiny movement. When I got up toward the north end of town, I came up on an old auto repair shop. And I don't know how else to say it except that the closer I got, the worse I felt. My stomach tightened. My whole body started telling me something was wrong before I had any reason to prove it. I slowed the cruiser almost to a stop and stared through the grimy front windows. I was straining to see anything past the tint and the glare, and then I caught it. A man's silhouette moving slowly past a window on the far side of the building. The second I saw it, I called for backup. I kept my eyes on the front entrance until the other units got there. Once they arrived, 4 of us moved in and checked the perimeter. That's when we found the front door unsecured. The moment I stepped inside, I smelled it. That sharp, metallic scent you never forget once you've learned it. Blood. We cleared the building room by room. At first, nothing looked disturbed. No signs of a struggle, nothing obviously out of place. But when we got to the back office, we found a man slumped over a desk with a handgun still in his right hand. He had clearly been dead for a while, and all I could think was, then who did I just see? That question stuck with me the whole scene. Later, during a second search, I noticed a security camera mounted above a filing cabinet. We were able to get access to the footage through a business contact, and I told the detectives exactly what I thought I'd seen. But the video showed only one person. Just him. He had come in earlier that evening by himself, unlocked the shop, gone into the office, and taken his own life. No one else entered. No one else left. There was no mystery person on that recording. No intruder. no movement except his. When the medical examiner arrived, they recovered a note from his jacket pocket addressed to his wife, asking her to forgive him. For a long time after that, I couldn't sleep right. I hated driving past that stretch of road. Something about that night stayed with me. It changed the way I trust my instincts, but it also left me with a question I've never been able to answer. Because logically, I know what the evidence showed. I know what the footage proved. Every rational part of me accepts that he was alone in that building. And still, I know what I saw. Maybe it was stress. Maybe it was some strange trick of light and timing. Or maybe it was something I'll never have a name for. All I know is that whatever I saw, or felt, led me straight to that shop that night. And I've never forgotten it. So I'm 20, and about a week ago, I moved into my apartment by myself for the first time. It's my first time living alone, and honestly, everything felt pretty normal in the beginning. I was settling in, getting used to the space, trying to enjoy the independence. Then a few nights ago, something started happening. At exactly 1:14 in the morning, I heard 3 knocks on my door. Not pounding, not frantic. Just 3 very calm, deliberate knocks. It instantly made me. I went to the peephole almost right away, but the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no sound of someone walking off, no elevator, nothing. It was just silence. At first, I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe somebody had the wrong apartment and realized it before I checked. I tried not to overthink it. But then the next night, it happened again. Same time, 1:14 a.m., same 3 knocks. This time I checked even faster, and still, there was no one there. I actually opened the door right after, and the hallway was completely empty. After that, it kept happening every night. Always 3 knocks, always at 1:14. Never during the day, never at any other hour. I started sitting quietly before that time, just waiting, trying to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. And every single night, right on cue, the knocks would come. I'd check, and again, nobody would be there. What got under my skin the most was how intentional it sounded. It wasn't random building noise or somebody being careless. It felt calm, measured, like whoever was doing it wasn't in any rush at all. I live alone, and I hadn't told anyone in the building because I kept wondering if I was making too much of it. But after a while, it started getting to me. Not because something huge was happening, but because of the waiting. That feeling of sitting there, knowing the time was getting closer, wondering if it was about to happen again. Every tiny sound in the apartment suddenly felt louder. Everything started to feel a little off. So I asked my friend Marcus to come stay over one night. I told him the whole thing, about the knocks, the exact timing, the empty hallway every time I looked. He didn't jump to some extreme conclusion or anything. He said it could be somebody messing around, or maybe someone confused and going to the wrong door, but he agreed it was strange, especially because it kept happening the same way. And honestly, just having another person there helped a lot. I didn't feel nearly as part. I'd also been thinking about whether I should open the door or not. A lot of people would probably say, never open it, and I get that. But the part that was really getting to me was not knowing. My mind was filling in the blanks, and that was making it worse. So I decided that if it happened again, I would wait until the second knock and then open the door, as long as Marcus was with me. That night, we waited. Everything was quiet for a while, and I started wondering if maybe it wouldn't happen this time. But then, right on time, we heard it. Knock. We looked at each other because we both heard it clearly. Then there was and then the second knock. So I walked to the door and opened it. It was my neighbor. I didn't really know him. I'd only seen him once before in passing when I first moved in. He lives alone in the apartment next to mine. When I opened the door, he looked confused, kind of disoriented, like he hadn't fully processed where he was. He wasn't aggressive, and he didn't seem like he was trying to scare me. He just looked lost. And that was it. It wasn't some person targeting me. It wasn't anything sinister. It was just a really unsettling situation with someone who wasn't fully aware of what he was doing in those moments. I didn't want to pry too much into his personal life because that didn't feel right. But it did explain everything: the timing, the strange pattern, and why it felt so eerie while still making no sense. So yeah, I know that's probably not the dramatic ending people might expect. But in a weird way, I'm grateful it turned out to be something explainable. The fear was really coming from not knowing. Now that I understand what was happening, I don't feel scared in the same way anymore. If it happens again, I'll handle it differently, because at least now I know where it's coming from. Hey everyone, mystery lovers of the M channel. Have you still been having trouble sleeping lately? I'm here to share some eerie, mysterious, real-life experiences that might just help you sleep a little better. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you so much for always supporting the channel. And by the way, we really appreciate all of you who've been sending in your own mysterious experiences. Don't hold back, keep them coming. Wishing you a great night's sleep. And now, let's get started. So, I live in this apartment complex that was built back in the early 60s, and I've been here a little over a year and a half now. It has that old building vibe, you know? Not creepy exactly, just seasoned. And every once in a while, really once in a while, when I'd be half asleep, barely even conscious, I'd feel something brush my foot. Just the faintest little touch. Sometimes I'd even dream about my old dog Milo, who passed a few years ago, and I'd wake up with that strange, sweet feeling like an animal had curled up near my feet. Always super brief, always spaced out by weeks, even months. I'd notice it, go, huh, and then life would move on. But then, one night changed the whole rhythm of it. It was the Thursday after Thanksgiving. My dad had driven me home from my parents' place. Nothing dramatic, just a couple drinks, and honestly, the kind of amount that used to mean something in my 20s but barely makes a dent now. By the time I got into bed, I was sleepy, calm, totally fine. I remember lying there with my phone in my hand, about to text someone back, and I started drifting off. And suddenly, whoosh. Like this tickly sweep of air skimmed across my face, almost like something dashed by, close enough that I felt it. And right after that, that familiar sensation landed at my feet again. Except this time it didn't vanish. In my mind, like instantly, in my gut, I just knew. That's a cat. And before you ask, yes, I wondered if I was imagining it. But if there was any leftover fuzziness from the earlier evening, it was gone right then. I was awake. I was sober. I was very much present. I'm lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, and then I feel this odd pressure on my stomach. Not painful, just there. Like the gentle indent of weight, and even this faint warmth, like a cat had settled on me. Except there was nothing to see. And then, oh my God, this motion starts. That unmistakable kneading. You know when cats make biscuits? That back and forth tiny paw motion. It felt exactly like that. Two little paws, pressing, alternating, like they were getting comfy or claiming the spot. Except, again, nothing was visible. And that's the part where my brain officially started to spiral. Because I tried to stay calm, but the more I thought, okay, it's a cat, the more another part of my mind went, or it's not a cat, and you're inviting something weird to knead your organs. I got so freaked out I couldn't sleep. I finally gave up and moved to the couch in the living room thinking, okay, new location, new vibe, problem solved. Nope, it followed me. I barely slept at all, and the next day I was exhausted. At some point in the afternoon, I ended up lying down again, just trying to catch up, and it happened again. Same thing. I'm on my back, and there's that pressure, that warmth, and then the tickling sensation creeps up my legs and drifts toward my face, like whatever it is inching closer. Like it has a body, like it's curious, like it's checking me out. And I know this is going to sound strange, but mixed in with the fear, there's this other feeling too, like affection, like I'm being watched over, almost protected. It's not menacing. It feels loving, familiar even. And here's the wild part. It started happening all the time, every day. Every time I lie back down, bed or couch, it shows up like clockwork. And now there's no question of alcohol or sleepiness or anything like that. I'm fully sober, fully awake, and it still happens. So at this point, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, if it is a cat, maybe two, honestly, because sometimes it feels wide, like there's more than one set of paws, then they are suddenly extremely active. Like they've decided, ah yes, this one. This is our person. Which is funny because I've always wanted a cat. And then my mom comes over. My mom's name is Denise, and she's the kind of person who doesn't roll her eyes at this stuff. She and I are both kind of, let's just say we're open-minded. We're paranormal fans. So she comes by, partly to visit, partly to see if I'm losing it. We literally crawl into bed together like we're kids at a sleepover, get under the covers, and start giggling because the whole thing is absurd. And I'm telling her, just wait. If it's going to happen, it happens pretty fast once you settle in. And we're lying there, quieting down, and I'm half holding my breath like, please let this happen so I'm not alone in this. A few moments pass, and then Denise goes, very calmly, oh, I feel it. I swear I could have cried with relief. I was like, what do you feel? And she goes, a warmth, and like a little weight. Just like that. No fear, no drama, just matter-of-fact confirmation. And I cannot even tell you how validated I felt in that moment. Because whatever this is, whether it's ghost cats, residual energy, some weird old building phenomenon, or something my brain can't properly label, it wasn't just me. And honestly, I don't even know what I want the ending to be. Part of me is still startled every time it happens. Part of me wishes they'd just curl up quietly and take a nap like normal cats. But another part of me, this soft, secret part, feels kind of lucky. Like somewhere in this old building, something decided I needed a little company. Okay, so I'm going to tell you this the way it actually felt, because I've tried to talk myself out of it for years, and I can't. For most of my life, I was the kind of person who rolled their eyes at paranormal stuff. Like, sure, spooky stories are fun, but in real life, I always figured there was a normal explanation. But there's one night from when I was a kid that never left me. It was a long time ago, maybe 8 or 9 years back, when I was around 11. I remember being in bed, staring up at the ceiling, that weird in-between moment where you're not sure if you're drifting off or if you just woke up. The room was quiet, normal. And then I looked toward the window. Sitting in the windowsill was something. Not a person, not really. More like a shape, like darkness had weight and decided to fold itself into a body. It was crouched in this unsettling way, like someone perched for a jump. The closest comparison I can make is that comic book kind of pose, where the hands are down near the feet and the knees angle out wide, like it's balanced and ready. It didn't have a clear face, not eyes you could point to, but I swear to you it still looked like it was staring directly at me. And the emotion coming off it, God, it was so strong. Angry. Not just scary angry, but this sharp, hostile feeling like it hated that I could see it. I froze for a split second, then I just bolted. I ran straight to my parents' room and shook them awake, full panic, heart slamming, trying to explain through tears and stuttering. My dad, Ethan, got up right away, and my mom, Marisol, came with us. We went back to my room together, lights on. My parents scanning the window like they were going to catch a burglar. And it was gone. They did the parent thing, bad dream. You were half asleep. Your imagination got you. And I wanted to believe them, I really did. But the problem was, I wasn't trapped in bed. I wasn't paralyzed. I hadn't been in a nightmare haze. I moved. I ran. I was awake enough to feel the carpet under my feet. So I kept that memory tucked away in my chest like a rock, heavy but hidden. Until recently. A few days ago, I was talking with my mom, just a normal conversation, nothing spooky, and she mentioned something that made my stomach drop so hard it felt like the air left my body. She told me she'd gotten up in the night to use the bathroom. She said she was fully awake, steady on her feet, not groggy. And when she stood up, she saw someone sitting in the windowsill. Not a shadow, not a coat hanging, not a shape, maybe. A dark figure, a man-shaped presence, and she said it felt angry. Then she described the way it was sitting, that same crouched, perched position, hands down near the feet, knees angled outward, like it was balanced there, watching. And here's the part that made my skin go cold. She said it didn't have a face, like there was just nothing there, a blankness where features should be. She went to the bathroom, came back, gone. And the whole time she was talking, she wasn't trying to scare me. She was just confused, disturbed, like she needed to say it out loud to make sense of it. She'd completely forgotten about what I saw as a kid. I hadn't brought it up in years. But her description matched mine so closely, it was like we were reading from the same script. And before you say it, because I tried to say it too, this wasn't sleep paralysis. I've had sleep paralysis before. I know what it feels like to be trapped in your own body, to panic because you can't move. This wasn't that. And once she said it, all these other moments I'd filed away as weird but probably nothing started crawling back. There's this story my mom told me from when I was a baby. My grandfather passed away shortly before I was born. Weeks before, I think. My mom has always said she felt like he never really got to meet me, and that made her sad. One night, when I was still tiny, she was standing in the hallway and swears she watched the handle of my bedroom door turn on its own. The door opened slowly, like someone was easing it open to peek inside. No drafts, no one behind it. She always said she believed it was her dad checking on me, and that story never scared me. If anything, it felt strangely comforting. Then there was another thing. When I was somewhere around 7, give or take, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a man sitting in the corner of my room. Not looming, not threatening, just sitting there quietly, like he was waiting. I can't remember his face now, which is frustrating, but I remember the feeling. I wasn't afraid. I was confused, maybe, but not scared. It felt calm. The next morning I told my parents, and when we looked over at that corner, there was a big smiley face balloon tucked there. I'd drawn it myself earlier that week, so it wasn't weird for it to exist. But the thing is, in my memory, I didn't see a balloon. I saw a person. And now, after what my mom saw on the windowsill, I can't help wondering if my brain has been trying to translate something it doesn't understand into something it can handle. Like it picks man in the corner or balloon because the alternative is too wrong to process. And there's one more layer to all of this that makes it feel heavier. My family's had a rough run. Not in a dramatic movie way, just this long, grinding stretch of illness and bad luck. I've dealt with chronic health problems for as long as I can remember. My mom's been sick on and off for years. My dad's been battling depression for what feels like forever. We've even joked, half joked, that the house has bad energy, like it's just sad, like something in it sticks to you. I always dismissed that. I didn't want to be the kind of person who blamed hard life stuff on a curse. But after my mom described that faceless, angry figure in the same place I saw it, in the same pose, with the same feeling, I don't know. Now I'm sitting here thinking, what if there really is something in this house? Or what if it's attached to the room? Or what if it's attached to us? And the scariest part is how specific it is, like it has a favorite spot, like it knows where to sit, like it's done it before, like it can do it again whenever it wants. I'm not telling you this because I want to be dramatic. I'm telling you because I'm genuinely frightened, and I needed to say it out loud to someone who will actually listen, because I don't know what else to do with it. So, when I was little, it was just me, my mom, and my two sisters in this old 1930s place at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. It looked like a normal family home from the outside. Small front garden, neat little row of neighbors, the kind of street where you'd hear kids kicking a ball around in summer. But inside, it never felt calm. My mom was with a man back then, Callum, and he had a temper that filled up the whole house. I grew up hearing shouting that would switch from slammed doors to the kind of silence that made your stomach twist. And it wasn't just him. My Aunt Denise would show up sometimes late and drunk, angry at everything and nothing. One of my sisters, Leanne, was older than me by years, and when she hit a rough patch with drugs, it was like living beside a storm, unpredictable, loud, and terrifying. Even as a kid, I didn't sleep in total darkness. I just couldn't. The dark felt crowded, like it held its breath and waited for me to relax. One night, when I was maybe 8 or so, I was sharing a room with my stepbrother at the time, Jame. I had the top bunk, he had the bottom. I remember waking up and sitting up suddenly, like something had pulled me awake by the spine. And there, near the doorway, was this shape. Not a person exactly, but definitely male, medium build. And on his head, clear as day, a tall hat. Like an old-fashioned top hat. It wasn't fuzzy or dreamlike either. It was a solid, pitch-black silhouette that felt wrong in a way I still can't properly describe. Years later, I stumbled across people talking about the Hat Man, and my stomach dropped, because it matched what I saw so closely it made my skin prickle. But at the time, I didn't have a name for it. I just knew I was staring at something that didn't belong in my bedroom. By the time I was around 10 or 11, things changed at home. Callum and Jame were gone, and my sisters were older, off out with their own lives, so it was often just me. My mom, Tara, started leaving me home alone more and more, even at night, because she'd go to the pub with friends and lose track of time. I remember trying to fall asleep one evening and feeling this heavy presence above me, like the air had thickened. Every time I shut my eyes, it was like something leaned closer. I'd open them again, heart hammering, and I'd catch movement at the edge of my vision. Shadows on the staircase, just out of focus, like they didn't want me looking straight at them. And there were footsteps sometimes, faint, careful steps, like someone testing each stair. I got so scared of being alone in that house that I'd actually go outside and sit on the front step in the cold, hugging my knees, waiting for headlights to sweep across the road. I'd rather be out there, exposed, than inside with whatever that feeling was. The strangest part is that even before the worst of the family chaos really hit, I'd already felt like the house had sides to it. Like there was a kind of female bitterness in the garden and a male heaviness inside the walls. When I was about 7, I remember being at the bottom of the stairs needing the toilet. My sister Leanne was babysitting and told me to go upstairs. I started climbing, and halfway up I just froze. Not because I heard anything, not because I saw anything. I just couldn't move. My body refused. The landing above felt like a line I wasn't allowed to cross. I stood there long enough to start panicking, then ran back into the kitchen and ended up wetting myself because I couldn't bring myself to go up there. When I was a teenager, I tried to fight back in the only way I knew how. I stood in my room one night and said, out loud, shaky but stubborn, something like, "In the name of Jesus, you are not welcome here. Leave me alone." And right after I said it, the spare bedroom door, across the hall, made this slow, tight creak and moved like it was being gently pushed closed. Not slammed, not dramatic, just deliberate. I remember my first thought being, okay, maybe it's a window, so I ran to check. The window was shut, no draft, no one else there. And of course, when I tried telling anyone, they shrugged it off. No one in my house wanted to hear it, and no one seemed to experience it the way I did. There were other stories floating around the family too, like little crumbs of something bigger. My gran once told me she saw a woman standing at the top of her stairs, just watching. She had more than one story like that. Things she'd say in a low voice, like if she spoke too clearly, it might invite it back. My mom and her sisters used to talk about this old clown doll my gran kept, and they swore it moved on its own sometimes. They also talked about footsteps pacing and tapping on a wall, but my mom always insisted it was imagination, nerves, everyone winding each other up. One of my sisters had a moment too. She once said that when she was home alone having a bath, she heard something fall and hit the floor hard, like a heavy object. When she got out to check, nothing was out of place. Later on, she claimed she didn't remember saying it, which honestly made it feel worse somehow, like the house swallowed people's certainty. The thing that made me feel the least crazy, though, was when my sister's friend, Mia, stayed with us for a while. She brought her boyfriend over one evening, and the two of them were home alone. Later, Mia told me, wide-eyed and deadly serious, that a tray had slid, or more like flown, from a counter in the kitchen and landed on the floor across the other side of the room. And her boyfriend swore he saw it too. That's what stuck with me. Because it wasn't just a feeling, or a shadow you could blame on tired eyes. If they were telling the truth, it was something physical. A couple of years ago, I ended up talking about all of this with two old childhood friends, people I'd known back then when I still lived in that house. I hadn't told anyone outside family as a kid, not really. I just kept it tucked away like a shameful secret. One friend told me she always felt like something was in the walls, like the house had a pulse you couldn't see. Another friend, who'd gotten into spiritual practices as an adult, said she felt a dark female presence connected to the garden shed out back. And then, this part still gets me. I moved out, built a life away from that street, and for a while everything went quiet. Until it didn't. About 8 years after leaving, I started feeling watched again. It was subtle at first, like the same old sensation creeping back, that prickling awareness at the back of my neck. I mentioned it casually to a woman I worked with, Sienna, who said she was clairvoyant. I didn't tell her the whole story. I only said I'd been feeling like someone was there, like I wasn't alone when I should have been. She looked at me and said, very calmly, that she'd sensed something around me for a while. She called it a negative attachment. She described it as sadistic, like it fed on fear and emotion. And the horrible thing is, it was exactly how I would have described it myself if I'd had the courage to say it out loud first. But then my dad went quiet and told me something that made my whole body go cold. He said that when he was a kid, he grew up rough, in care, moved around a lot. He used to see a male figure outside his bedroom window, a man-shaped shadow, watching. And when I described what I'd seen as a child, he said it freaked him out because it sounded the same. The thing is, I didn't grow up with my dad. We reconnected when I was 16, so it's not like I heard his story first and absorbed it. If anything, it felt like two separate puzzle pieces snapping together in a way I didn't want. And now, honestly, I still don't know what to believe. I'm older, but I still feel watched sometimes. I still can't fully relax in the dark. Part of me wonders if it's trauma, years of tension in a house that never felt safe, my brain wired to expect danger. Part of me wonders if it's something else, something that clung on, or something that runs in families like an echo. All I know is this. Even now, when the lights go out, there's a part of me that waits. Like I'm listening for the stairs. Like I'm still that kid in the front garden, watching the road, praying for headlights. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Elena, and this is one of those memories that never really leaves you, no matter how much time passes. So, when I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, somewhere in that range, I had this experience that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. I've only ever met one other person who described something even remotely similar, which honestly is part of why it stuck with me so hard. It was late, and I'd already climbed into bed. I wasn't drifting off. I know I was awake. Our place was small back then, and my bedroom was basically tucked off the main area, so from where I was lying, I could see into the hallway and the kitchen beyond it. And then, out of nowhere, everything started vibrating. Not like a little shake. I mean violent. Like the whole world had turned into a buzzing, rattling machine. The mattress was trembling under me. My body was trembling with it. Like the vibration was coming from the air itself. It lasted only a few seconds, maybe 3 or 4, but it felt longer because my brain couldn't catch up to what was happening. That's when I looked forward, and I saw it. There was this shadow thing, right there in my line of sight. It didn't look like a normal shadow. The best way I can explain it is that it looked flat, almost two-dimensional, like someone cut a shape out of darkness and held it upright. It had this rounded head and these short horns that curved up from the sides. I can't swear on every detail, but I remember thinking it had hands that ended in points, like claws. And while the room kept vibrating like crazy, it started moving toward me. I keep saying moving, but it didn't walk like a person. It was more like it would jump forward in little bursts, like a glitch in a video game. 1 second it was there, then it wasn't. Then it was suddenly closer, and closer again. I completely lost it. I was crying, screaming, just panicking in that helpless, child way where your whole body feels too small for the fear inside it. And the worst part was that nothing I did changed anything. The shaking didn't slow down, and the thing didn't stop. It got so close to me that I swear, if I'd scooted even a tiny bit toward the edge of the bed, my face would have touched it. That's the part I can still feel in my memory. the closeness, like it was right up against my space, right up against me. And then I screamed for my mom. "Mom!" as loud as I could. The instant I did, everything stopped. The vibration cut out like someone flipped a switch, and the shadow thing vanished. Not faded away, not backed up into the dark, just gone, right in front of my eyes. People sometimes suggest things like dreams or sleep stuff, and I get why they say that. But what messes with me is how seamless it was. There wasn't any hazy shift, no moment where I woke up. I was already awake, and when it disappeared, I didn't lie there confused. I shot up immediately and ran. Like, I didn't hesitate. I sprinted straight to my mom's room as fast as my legs could carry me. I'm 19 now, so this happened around a decade ago, give or take, and I still think about it more often than I'd like to admit. I guess what I want to know is, has anyone else ever had something like that? The shaking, the buzzing, the way the figure moved, any of it. Because it's such a specific kind of terrifying, and I've spent years wondering what I actually experienced that night. So, let me tell you about my mom's place. It's this big, creaky old house, something like 120 years old now, and I used to live there full-time for a long stretch. And in my family, believing in ghosts isn't some quirky idea we joke about. It's just normal. Like, of course there's something here, kind of normal. Especially when we first moved in, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. There were little things that happened often enough that nobody could really shrug it off. Funny thing is, I was never the one with the most stories. I'd hear footsteps when nobody was upstairs, or I'd notice a door that I swear I shut sitting slightly open later, but nothing dramatic. Except for 2 moments years back that still stick to me. One of them isn't even worth getting into. It was weird, but whatever. The other one, that one still makes my chest feel tight when I remember it. I walked into the living room one night, just stepped in like normal, and it hit me like a wave. Full body panic. Like my brain suddenly decided I was in danger, even though nothing was happening. My heart was racing, my hands were tingling. I felt like I couldn't breathe right. It was so intense I actually backed out of the room. And the second I went into the kitchen, like the moment I crossed that doorway, it stopped. Completely. As if someone flicked a switch. I was alone that night, and at that age I was already kind of terrified of the idea that there were entities in the house. So I don't know what to make of it. Nothing jumped out at me, nothing chased me, no movie-style horror, just that sudden, targeted dread. Like the living room didn't want me there. My mom got really into the history of the place after a while. Old records, local stories, anything she could dig up. And she's convinced the main presence is a little girl. She calls her Lydia, which is not anyone's real name, just what she's always called her. Mom says Lydia feels like she's everywhere. The hallway, the stairs, sometimes the kitchen, sometimes the guest room. Then there's apparently another presence too, an older man. Weirdly gentle, calm, more like he's just hanging out. My mom calls him Walter, and she swears he mostly sticks to the master bedroom. Here's where it gets stranger. I moved out in 2020, and ever since then, like the last 2 or 3 years, every single time I go back to visit, I start feeling off. Not like a cold, not like allergies. No runny nose, no sore throat, no cough. It's more like an internal uneasiness, like my body is tired before I've done anything. Almost feverish, but not actually sick. Just drained and uncomfortable in a way I can't point to. Like my skin is heavier. Like my bones are tired. And it isn't just me. My sister has mentioned feeling the same thing, and my ex, Caleb, used to say the house made him feel wiped out too. He'd be totally fine anywhere else. Then we'd go over there, and within a little while, he'd get quiet and fatigued. like someone turned down his energy. At first I thought, okay, obvious answer, mold. Old house, old walls, maybe something hiding where you can't see it. But it's not like I step through the front door and instantly start coughing or feeling dizzy. It's not immediate like that. And my mom and the rest of the family who still live there, they're fine. Totally normal. No weird fatigue, no headaches, nothing. But me? Every visit, same pattern. And my sleep changes too. Normally I sleep like a rock. I rarely wake up once I'm out. But when I'm there, I wake up in the night, sometimes multiple times, like my body can't settle, like it's listening for something. Today I finally asked my mom straight up, "Do you know if there's mold here?" And she was like, "Maybe. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't know where, and I feel fine." So then I asked, "Does anyone else feel weird here when they visit?" And she said, "Just your sister. That's all I've heard." Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She goes, real casually, "You know, the activity kind of stopped when you moved out." And I laughed, like a little laugh, automatic. Because what do you even do with that? But inside I felt weirdly offended. Like, excuse me? What am I, the haunted house battery pack? But also, it scared me. Enough that I'm even talking about this at all. Because if things really did quiet down when I left, then why do I feel worse every time I come back? I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Part of me wants a logical explanation. Air quality, mold, stress, whatever. And another part of me can't ignore the pattern, or that living room moment, or the way my body reacts like it's bracing for something I can't see. And I keep coming back to this thought. I don't want a fight. I don't want to get rid of anything. If there is something there, Lydia, Walter, whatever it is, I don't want war. I want peace. I want to understand what's wrong. I want to stop feeling like the house is pulling the energy right out of me. I just don't know how to make peace with something I can't even prove is there. Hey, so this is something I didn't really talk about when I was a kid, mostly because I honestly didn't know it wasn't normal. When I was little, I used to get these strange moments, like I could sense someone right beside me when I was alone. Sometimes I'd hear a voice, like a quick whisper or a soft conversation, and then I'd realize there wasn't actually anyone there. And once in a while, it felt like something brushed my shoulder or pressed gently against my arm, the way a person does when they're trying to comfort you. The weird part is, it never felt threatening. If anything, I always felt safest in places that are supposed to feel creepy, like cemeteries. I know that sounds backwards, but graveyards always felt calm to me, like being wrapped up in a quiet blanket. Like I wasn't alone there. Like I was being watched over, in a good way. And then there was my childhood bedroom. That room had history. My mom told me it used to belong to my grandmother when she was young, and even as a kid, I felt like the room remembered people. The air felt heavy sometimes, but not in a bad way, more like it was full. One night, I went to sleep, and it was one of those rare sleeps where there were no dreams at all. Just darkness, stillness, peaceful. Then I woke up, like my body snapped awake before my mind even caught up. That almost never happened to me. I'd wake up sometimes, sure, but not like that. Not with that sudden spike of fear, like my heart was shouting, "Get up, get up, get up!" I stared into the dimness of my room, trying to make sense of why I felt so panicked. And that's when I saw him. Right near the closet, just outside the doorframe, there was this tall figure. Not a person exactly, more like a shape cut out of the darkness, darker than the darkness around it. He didn't move. He just stood there like he'd been waiting. And then I saw his eyes. Not glowing like a flashlight or anything, just this deep, unnatural red, like two embers. And I noticed something else that made my stomach drop. One arm was missing, gone from just below the elbow, like it ended too cleanly to be an accident. I remember pulling the blanket up so fast it nearly covered my nose, like that was going to protect me from whatever I'd just seen. And I started whispering to myself. Stupid little calming phrases, anything to keep myself from crying. I told myself it was just a trick of sleep, just shadows, just my brain. Eventually, I fell asleep like that, curled up tight, barely breathing. The next morning, I ran downstairs and told my dad. He didn't laugh exactly, but he wasn't scared either. He just kind of nodded like I'd told him I had a weird dream. Then he said something I'll never forget. He goes, "That sounds like your great-great-grandfather, Owen." And I was like, "What?" My dad walked to the hallway closet and pulled something out. An old prosthetic arm, the kind with worn straps and a faded, almost antique look to it. And the way it was built, it started right below the elbow, right where the figure's arm ended. I stood there staring at it for what felt like forever. And because my dad wasn't panicking, because he acted like this was just a strange family footnote, I tried to match his calm. I swallowed it down and told myself, "Okay, fine. Weird family thing. Moving on." I didn't really talk about it again for years. But when I was older, I finally mentioned it to my grandmother, Nana Ruth, just casually, like I was testing the water. And she didn't look surprised. She smiled, like I just reminded her of something sweet. Then she told me her story. Not rushing, not looming, just present. And according to her, he held out his hand, like a patient adult offering help. She said she took it. He walked her downstairs, step by step, helped her get a glass of water, walked her back up, and then, this part gives me chills every time. She said he tucked her in the way a parent would, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and she fell asleep feeling completely safe. When she finished telling me, she just looked at me with this soft expression and said, "He's always been around." And that's the thing. Over the years, I've still seen him. Not constantly, not like some movie where he's always in the corner of your vision, but enough times that I can't just pretend it was childhood imagination. And he's never hurt me. He's never threatened me. If anything, he shows up most when I'm vulnerable. Once, when I was really sick, like feverish, miserable, the kind of sick where the room feels like it's tilting, I kept noticing a shadowy figure watching from the edge of the doorway. Not staring in a predatory way, more like checking on me, like a quiet guard. It's hard to explain without sounding ridiculous, but it felt like concern. My family has stories too. Nana Ruth does, and my cousin Marin, who's just a little older than me, used to talk about a shadow friend when we were kids. She'd play in her room and leave space for him like he was really there. She even gave him a name, the Shadow Man. The creepy part is, neither of us knew the other had seen anything like that. We never compared notes. We never even talked about it. We only found out because Nana Ruth connected the dots one day, like she'd been holding the thread the whole time. So now, I'm left with this weird, lingering question. If this thing has followed our family for generations, if it's shown up in the same house, in the same halls, in the same kind of quiet moments, what is it? A protector? A spirit with some kind of attachment? Just a shared family story that our brains shaped into the same image. All I know is, I don't feel afraid of him. I feel watched over. But I can't help wondering if that's naive. Like maybe I've been calm about something I shouldn't be calm about. So yeah, That's why I'm telling you. Do you think this is something to be concerned about? Or does it sound like whatever this is, it's been trying to take care of us? So, I don't talk about this a lot, because even saying it out loud makes my skin prickle a little. But I'll start at the beginning. My first memory of it. It was Christmas Eve, and I was about 6 or 7. My brothers and sisters and I had all camped out in the living room together, like we always begged to do. Blankets on the floor, whispering until we got shushed, the whole thing. At some point in the night, I woke up. One of those half-awake moments where the room feels too quiet, like it's holding its breath, and I saw something moving down the hallway. At first I thought, oh, it's just our dog. We had this big black shepherd mix back then. His name was Ranger, and he padded around the house at night sometimes. Still, it startled me enough that I just watched. The shape came into the living room and drifted toward this sunken seating area we had, kind of like a little step-down nook. It had built-in couches with wooden backs, and those backs were narrow, honestly, not wide enough for a dog to balance on. But the thing, this dog-shaped figure, hopped up onto the back of the couch anyway. Not clumsy, not scrambling, more like a cat, smooth and weirdly precise. And then it perched there, completely still, like it had done it 100 times, just watching all of us sleeping. That's when the dread hit me, like someone poured ice water down my spine. I remember my chest tightening, my eyes stinging, and then I started crying. Quiet at first, then harder. I squeezed my eyes shut and just stayed frozen under my blanket until I eventually fell asleep again. For years, I tried to write it off as a nightmare. Except, later, when I brought it up, my siblings all went, "Wait, you remember that?" They didn't see what I saw, but they remembered me crying and being absolutely terrified in the middle of the night. That part was real. The next time was in high school. I woke up suddenly, and the first thing I saw was a shadow in the corner of my room. And my room was on the same floor, down the same hallway where I'd seen that dog-shaped figure when I was little. I remember staring so hard my eyes watered, trying to make my brain explain it away. A jacket? A chair? One of my sisters messing with me? I cycled through every excuse like I could force it to become normal. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. The outline was dog-like, but the joints, this is the part I can never quite explain without sounding ridiculous. The joints looked human, like the way an arm folds or a knee bends. It was sitting there in a way that reminded me of a person crouched low in the corner, except it had the shape of a dog, and it felt like it was watching me. After that, it started happening more often, waking up with that heavy, someone's here feeling, catching shadows that didn't make sense, nights where I barely slept. And at the same time, my life was kind of falling apart in the normal teenage way, but louder. My mental health was bad. I was angry all the time, fighting with my family, failing classes, just constantly exhausted and on edge. My parents pushed me into therapy because they didn't know what else to do with me. And honestly, I didn't know what to do with me either. There's one night that stands out more than the rest. I'd worked myself up so badly that I couldn't stay in my room anymore. I went to my sister Maya's room, right next to mine, and asked if I could sleep in there. She said yes, so I dragged my pillow and blanket in and curled up at the foot of her bed. And I slept great. No weird feelings, no shadows, nothing. That night was bright because the moon was full, and our back doors had big glass panels, so the house always caught shadows, tree branches moving, sometimes the animals in the yard if they wandered close enough. So I told myself, if I see something, it'll probably just be that. I stepped out of my sister's room into the hallway, clutching my blanket and pillow, and I froze so hard I swear I forgot how to breathe. I hadn't even seen anything yet. This was pure instinct. The hair on my arms lifted. The back of my neck went hot and tight. My body just locked up like it knew before my brain did. From where I stood, I couldn't see all the way down the hall, but I could see the wall that led into it. And on that wall, sliding into view, was the shadow of a dog, walking. The shape was unmistakable. The legs moved in that steady, casual way like it was just approaching, like it belonged there. And here's the thing. Our dog, Ranger, had been gone for months by then. I tried to reason it out anyway. A tree shadow, an animal outside, something passing the glass door. I tried so hard to make it be something normal, but the shadow kept getting closer, and it started to shift and shrink in a way that didn't match anything outside. It wasn't moving like a distant shadow from the yard. It was moving like whatever was making it was coming down the hallway toward me. Right before it would have rounded the corner into view, I snapped out of it. I bolted back into my sister's room, flipped on the light, and shook her awake. I was shaking so badly I could barely get words out. I didn't even know how to explain what I'd just seen, only that I couldn't go back out there. The next morning, I told my mom, and she didn't laugh. She didn't roll her eyes. She just got this tired, serious look and said something like, "I'm not surprised. When we were younger, your Aunt Leanne used a Ouija board in that part of the house. I've always felt like something lingered." That made my stomach drop, because I hadn't told her about the Christmas Eve thing. I hadn't told her about the corner shadow. She just already believed it could be real. After that, I told my other sister Tessa, and she went quiet, then admitted she'd always felt watched too, especially from the loft area in her room. And then she told me something that honestly freaked me out almost more than my own stories. She said once, when everyone else was out camping, she stayed home alone. She was on her bed with her back toward the bedroom door, and she felt what she thought was her cat climbing up, like that familiar little shift of weight on the mattress. She reached back to pet it, but the fur felt wrong. Coarse, wiry, mangy, nothing like her cat. She jerked her hand away and looked down, and her cat was curled up at the foot of the bed, asleep, not moving. She spun around, heart pounding, and there was nothing there. She said she searched the whole house for almost an hour, convinced maybe an animal had gotten in somehow. A raccoon, a stray, anything. But she found nothing. No open doors, no signs, nothing. After all that, weirdly, I didn't really see it again. We'd still get strange little things, like knocks on bedroom doors when no one was there. Stuff you could almost shrug off if you tried hard enough. But as I got older, I started spending less time at home. I started dating, staying out more, and eventually I moved out. And the less time I spent in that house, the better I got. That's the part I can't ignore. I've tried 100 times to convince myself it was all just dreams, or stress, or my mind filling in shadows. I've even wondered if my family, without meaning to, kind of fed the story and made it bigger over time. But there's still this part of me that won't let it go, because that fear felt real. And some nights, it really did feel like whatever was there, if anything was there, was drawn to me when I was at my lowest. Like it liked the version of me that was exhausted and angry and unraveling. I don't know. I don't have a neat ending. I just know the image of that dog-shaped thing perched like a cat on a narrow wooden couch back still comes to me sometimes, sharp as a photograph. And if you've ever heard of something like that, a dog-like figure with human-like joints, moving wrong, watching, please tell me I'm not the only one. So, I've always been that kid, the sensitive one. The one who notices everything. Sounds that feel too sharp, lights that feel too bright, certain smells that make my stomach turn, and sometimes just a weird vibe in a room that makes me want to leave immediately. And along with all that sensitivity, there were these moments, ever since I can remember, where I'd hear or see things that didn't really line up with reality. The very first thing I can clearly pull up in my mind happened when I was tiny, like preschool tiny. I was on the floor in my bedroom, playing with this little plastic triceratops I was obsessed with, and I hear someone outside my window call my name in this soft, sing-song voice. Sweet, affectionate, the way a parent calls you when dinner's ready. It was so warm and familiar that I didn't even hesitate. I remember popping up, leaning toward the window and going, "Yes?" all cheerful. And there was nobody. Nothing. Just quiet. Now the weird part? My name back then was uncommon. Not unheard of, but rare enough that I barely ever met anyone with it. So it wasn't like the neighborhood was full of kids getting called in for snacks. It felt aimed at me. A few years later, maybe I was 8 or 9, we moved because my stepdad's job transferred him. New area, new house. And it wasn't one of those creaky, ancient places with a dramatic attic and scary family legends. It was bright, modern, clean lines, big windows. The kind of house where you'd think nothing spooky could stick. But almost immediately, kid me became convinced there was someone upstairs who wasn't part of our family. Not a monster, not evil, just there. Like a presence that didn't belong to us, and didn't care that I noticed it. I didn't know what else to do, so I tried to be polite. I'd say hello when I walked past the stairs. Good night. Goodbye when I left for school. Like, "Hey, I see you. Please don't make this worse." And then, honestly, the hardest part started. I watched a scary movie at a sleepover, or maybe it was at home, I don't even remember anymore. And it rattled me in a way I didn't expect. You know how people say, "It's just a movie, you'll forget it in a few days"? Yeah, not me. That fear didn't fade. It grew. Nights became this whole ordeal. I'd lie in bed with the lamp on, heart thumping, and this heavy dread would settle over me like a blanket I couldn't throw off. Sometimes I'd see shapes, thin, almost see-through silhouettes, moving through my room even when I could clearly see everything around me. Like they weren't hiding, like they didn't need to. When it got too intense, I'd creep into my mom's room and ask if I could sleep next to her. And she'd let me, because she's my mom, and she wanted me to feel safe. But here's the part that still makes my skin prickle a little. Even next to her, it didn't fully stop. A couple of times, I'd hear that same sing-song voice again, calling my name like it was coaxing me. And hearing it while I was curled up beside my mom sent me straight into panic, because it made me realize something. Whatever it was, it didn't care where I was sleeping. And then there was this other thing that happened too. These strange wake-ups that weren't really wake-ups. Like I'd open my eyes, and I'd know I was conscious, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And sometimes I'd get this sensation of drifting upward, floating, like I was lighter than air. Then I'd struggle, like fight to come back, and suddenly it felt like I'd drop from somewhere high above, falling fast, and I'd slam right back into myself. But around 12 or 13, something shifted. I can't even tell you what changed. Nothing dramatic happened, no big revelation. But suddenly, I could sleep without a light on. Nights weren't perfect, but they stopped being a nightly horror show. After that, the experiences became occasional. Maybe once in a while I'd wake up and feel that familiar dread, the strong impression that something was in the room with me. But I wasn't the same little kid anymore. I'd grown. I'd adapted. So I taught myself a trick, kind of a mental reflex. And yes, it sounds silly, but it helped. I called it the now shield. Because when you're lying there, half awake, heart racing, you don't need a plan for next week. You need something that works right now. So I'd picture this barrier snapping into place around me the second I said the word in my head. Not just a bubble of protection, more like a force field with teeth. Like anything that meant me harm would get hurt if it tried to push in. It didn't erase the fear instantly, but it gave me something solid to hold on to. Like, okay, I'm scared, but I'm not helpless. And for years, that was the routine. Once or twice a year maybe, I'd jolt awake in that old dread, and I'd throw up the now shield, like flipping on a switch, and I'd eventually fall asleep again. As I moved through my 20s and into my 30s, it happened less and less. Like whatever thread connected me to it was thinning. And then there was one last moment, the only one in my adult life that felt undeniably weird. I was 27. I'd just gotten into this relationship with a guy named Milan, and it was, how do I put this kindly, emotionally loud. A lot of stress, a lot of tension. The kind of relationship where your nervous system never fully unclenches. Sometimes on weekends we'd take an edible to shut our brains off for a few hours. One night, he was already asleep. I was in the bathroom, doing the normal bedtime stuff, brushing my teeth, splashing water on my face, trying to feel human. I walk back into the bedroom, and I stop dead. Because there's a dark figure standing at the foot of the bed. Not a shadow from the closet, not a coat on a chair. A shape that had presence, humanish, tall, still, like it belonged there. And here's the part that shocked me. I wasn't terrified. I was startled, absolutely. My whole body went, "What the hell?" But I didn't feel that old, drowning fear. If anything, I had this odd impression that it was just as surprised as I was, like we both turned the corner at the same time. And I did something I honestly didn't know I was capable of. I stepped forward and I swung my hand straight through it, like a shove, like a smack, like, no, not tonight. There was no resistance. My hand passed right through. But the moment it did, this icy cold rushed up my arm and spread through my chest, like the air in my body had turned to winter for half a second. And then it vanished. The cold faded. The figure was gone. And since that night, nothing. No sing-song voice, no dread, no shapes, no floating falling wake-ups, no need for the now shield. Just quiet. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if it was my brain, my stress, the edible, the house, my nervous system, something spiritual, something psychological, maybe a tangled mix of all of it. But what I do know is this. For the first time since I was a kid, the night finally felt like it belonged to me. Okay, so I've had a handful of things happen to me over the years that I still can't fully explain. And weirdly enough, the place it happened the most was my grandparents' house. The first time I was really little, maybe 4 or 5. I remember staying the night there, just visiting, and we were all in the living room watching TV. At some point, I had to pee so bad I thought I was going to explode, so I ran to the bathroom. I did my business, and as I went to leave, I reached for the door. My hand was still on the inside handle as I started to pull it shut behind me. And I swear to you, I felt this cold, tiny hand slide right over mine, like it grabbed my hand on top of the handle. And then I heard a little girl's voice, right up close by my ear, whisper one word. Not my name, something else. She whispered, "Mason." I spun around so fast my heart practically jumped out of my throat. And there was nothing there. The bathroom felt way darker all of a sudden, like the air got heavier, and I just bolted straight back to the living room. I told my grandparents what happened, and they kind of laughed it off like, "Oh, you've got a big imagination," the way adults do. And sure, I did. Like, I loved drawing monsters and pretending I was some superhero when I ran around outside. But I wasn't the kind of kid who made up voices in my ear or felt hands grabbing mine. That didn't feel like pretend. That felt real. The second time was years later, still at my grandparents' place, only this was after my grandma had passed away. We were all there for a holiday dinner. I want to say it was Thanksgiving, but it might have been Christmas. I just know the house was full, and everyone was talking and laughing and doing that thing families do where they end up reminiscing. I was in the living room with a few relatives, talking about old memories. My grandma, funny stories, all that. And out of nowhere, I felt a tug on my sleeve from behind. Not a brush, not like someone bumped me, an actual tug, like somebody trying to get my attention. I turned around, expecting to see my little niece, Ava, messing with me. But nobody was there. I could see into the hallway. Nobody behind the couch. Nothing. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe my shirt snagged on something. A few minutes later, it happened again. Harder this time, like a real pull. This time I whipped around immediately. Like the second I felt it, I turned. And again, nothing. No one close enough to have done it, and Ava was right in front of me on the floor playing with a toy, totally focused, not even looking my way. So I did the awkward thing and asked around like, "Okay, who's messing with me?" Everyone swore they weren't. No jokes, no laughing, no gotcha. Just genuine confusion. Could it have been a prank? Maybe. But if it was, nobody's admitted it. And to this day, that still bugs me, because it felt the same kind of strange as what happened when I was little, like something reaching for me from just out of sight. The third set of experiences happened later in the house I live in now, out near the woods, just outside town. And this one isn't like one big moment. It's more like a bunch of smaller things that pile up. Like, I've had stuff get knocked off counters when I know for a fact it was sitting stable and centered. No edge, no wobble, no reason it should have fallen. One time I had my backpack hanging up in the hallway on a hook, one of those big, sturdy hooks with a deep loop. The bag was heavy, full of textbooks. There's no way it should have slipped off unless someone lifted it up and off the hook. And sometimes, when the house is really quiet, especially if I'm sitting there drawing or just zoning out, I'll hear faint voices from another room. Not loud enough to make out words, but enough to make my head snap up like, "Hello?" And every time, I'm alone. Then a couple weeks ago, my sister, Lena, decided it was a good idea to mess with a Ouija board, even though I told her not to. I warned her. I really did. Later, she told me something that honestly made my stomach drop. She and her boyfriend Jordan were in their room watching TV when both of them saw something, move into the bathroom, just out of the corner of their eyes. They described it the same way, like a person-shaped shadow, almost solid black. Here's the part that gets me. Neither of them said anything. They both saw it, but they didn't speak. They just kind of froze and kept watching the TV like maybe they could pretend it didn't happen. After a while, like 20 minutes, they called out my name, thinking it was me messing around since I was the only other person in the house. They knocked. No answer. So they opened the bathroom door. And nobody was there. That's when they finally admitted to each other what they'd seen, and apparently they both described the same thing without prompting. They came to my room freaked out and asked if I'd gone in there. I told them no, and yeah. They were spooked after that. Honestly, so was I. And then there's one more story. This one didn't happen to me, but it happened to my brother Caleb a few years back in this same house. He got really sick, like dangerously sick. He's okay now, thank God. But he told me that when he was at his worst, he was outside on the back porch throwing up, barely able to move, just drained and shaky. He looked out toward the pasture behind the house, and he said he saw 3 figures come out from the tree line. 3 tall shapes, all dressed in black. And he said their eyes looked huge, dark and wrong, and their mouths were wide open, almost like those horror masks, except he swore it was like human faces, just twisted and withered. He said they just stood there staring at him. He forced himself up, stumbled back inside, and looked out through the window. And they were gone, like they were never there. Now, I don't know what to make of that one. Part of me wonders if he was hallucinating because he was so sick, but it still messes with me, especially with everything else that's happened in this house. So yeah, that's basically the collection of weird stuff that's happened to me and my family. I'm not sitting here claiming I have all the answers. I don't. I just know what I felt, what I heard, what I saw, and it didn't feel like, oops, coincidence in the moment. I'm a Christian, so I pray over my home and my family. And we're okay. We're living our lives. Nothing's dragging chains down the hallway every night or anything like that. But looking back, it still gives me chills. And honestly, more than anything, it makes the world feel bigger. Like there's more going on than we can easily explain. Maybe it's spiritual. Maybe it's the brain playing tricks. Maybe it's coincidence stacked on coincidence. Believe me or don't, either way is fine. I just wanted to share it because it's strange, it's spooky, and it's been sitting with me for a long time. So, I want to tell you about my grandma. Her name was Mei Ling, and the strangest, most comforting dream I've ever had. It started in late September 2024. At first, we didn't even realize something was seriously wrong. She was acting off, weak, kind of confused, struggling in ways we kept trying to explain away. We thought maybe she was just exhausted or coming down with something. But after about several days of watching her get worse, we rushed her to the ER. She ended up staying in the hospital for weeks, and during that time, she was put on a ventilator more than once. Each time they had to do it, it felt like we lost a little more of her. When she'd wake up again, it wasn't really her the way we knew her. Her speech started slipping away, and she couldn't stay awake long. It was like her body was still fighting, but her mind was getting pulled farther and farther from us. The last time they put her on the ventilator was overnight, going into the start of the week. And what made it so brutal was that she'd actually seemed a little better in the days before that, like maybe she was turning a corner. So when it happened again, it hit us like a wave. Just pure shock. I remember being at work when my dad, June, called me. I stepped out, sat in my car during lunch, and I just broke. Like that ugly, can't breathe kind of crying. Then I wiped my face, walked back in, and pretended I was functioning. You know how people do that when they don't have a choice. That night I went to see her. There wasn't much to say or do. She was lying there, ventilator, quiet, unresponsive. The room felt heavy, like the air itself was tired. I went home, got ready for bed, and fell asleep almost immediately. And then I had this dream. In the dream, I'm back at the hospital, and it starts with me riding the elevator up to her floor. I can still picture it, like I'm actually standing there, watching the numbers climb. The doors open, and I step out, and everything is so familiar that it feels real. I turn the corner, walk down the hallway, and go straight to her room. When I walk in, she's sitting up in the bed, and she looks like herself. Not like the version I'd been seeing in the hospital. Her hair is neatly brushed. Her face looks warm and awake. There are no tubes, no IV lines, no medical restraints, no compression socks, none of it. Her eyes are bright, like the way they used to be when she'd tease me or laugh at something on TV. And she's smiling at me, really smiling. We only ever spoke Chinese together, so in the dream she speaks to me in Chinese, like normal, like nothing ever happened. And she says, so gently, something like, "Don't be scared anymore. I'm going to be okay. Everything will be okay. You don't have to carry this worry for me." And that's it. The dream just ends, like someone turned off a light. I woke up so confused, because I don't usually have dreams like that. Most of my dreams are chaotic and ridiculous, like my brain throws random nonsense at the wall and calls it a night. But this one was different. It was clear, calm, detailed. It felt like a real visit. The next day I told my dad about it. He went to see her earlier than I could, and he said she still wasn't responsive. He didn't stay long because it was just hard. And after work, even though I was exhausted and honestly didn't want to go, because going there every day was wearing me down, I went anyway. I couldn't stand the thought of not showing up. When I got there, her body felt cold in places. I remember holding her hand and realizing how quickly someone can feel like they're slipping away. Like you're watching it happen and you can't stop it. And I know people can explain dreams a million different ways. I know grief does things to your mind, but I can't help what it felt like. It felt like she came to me on purpose. Like she wanted to tell me, I'm okay. You can breathe now. And honestly, that message held me up. It gave me a kind of closure I didn't know I needed so badly. I still miss her. I miss her all the time. But I'm grateful, so unbelievably grateful, that I got one last moment with her, even if it was in a dream. Okay, so I have to tell you about what happened the other night, because it seriously messed with me in a way I didn't expect. I first saw The Sixth Sense, you know, that M. Night Shyamalan movie, forever ago. Like when it was still one of those, you have to see this films everyone was talking about. Back then, I remember thinking it was brilliant, genuinely. I told people to watch it, recommended it without hesitation, the whole thing. Fast forward to a few nights ago. My husband, Evan, and I were scrolling around, doing that classic, nothing looks good routine. And somehow we land on The Sixth Sense. He'd never seen it, which felt almost impossible to me, so I was like, oh, we're doing this. Tonight. I remembered the famous twist, of course I did. But I'd forgotten most of the rest. I honestly thought it would be fun, like revisiting an old classic where you notice new details and appreciate how well it's made. And while we were watching it, that part was true. It is incredibly well done. The acting, the mood, the slow burn of it, it's just a good movie. But when it ended, I fell apart. And I don't mean like, oh, that was creepy. I mean I was wrecked. I got this intense, sick, unsettled feeling that dug into me and would not let go. Like my body was reacting as if something I'd seen wasn't fiction. It was a warning. Like it had tapped into something real, something too close. I remember sitting there afterward trying to act normal, like, haha, wow, great movie. But inside I was spiraling. My chest felt tight. My skin felt prickly. And the worst part was this heavy, awful certainty, like, that's how it is. That's what's really out there. So I started doing what I always do when I'm freaked out. I tried to explain it away. I asked myself if maybe the first time I watched it, I was going through something stressful, and this second viewing just reopened that feeling. But I can't point to anything specific, nothing obvious, no clear trigger. What I can say is this: the way the movie portrays ghosts feels disturbingly believable to me. Not the theatrical stuff, not the dramatic, floating sheet nonsense, but the way they seem stuck in their own pain, repeating patterns, showing up with this raw emotion still clinging to them. That part hit me like a punch because it matched something I've quietly felt for a long time. I've never had some vivid, full-on experience like the kid in the movie. Nothing like seeing someone standing clearly in the hallway or talking to a dead person in a room. But I've always felt like the distance between me and whatever you want to call it is smaller than it is for other people. Like there's a thinner veil, a thinner membrane. I've had moments, tiny ones, where a room suddenly feels occupied in a way I can't explain. Or I get that sensation of being watched when I'm completely alone. Or I'll walk into a space and it feels emotionally charged, like the air is holding on to something that happened there. And I know people can call that anxiety, imagination, suggestion. Trust me, I've said all of those words to myself too. But after watching that movie again, it felt like the film was speaking the same language as those moments. Like it wasn't inventing the idea of the paranormal, it was recognizing it. And here's the part that's hard to admit. I haven't slept properly since. Every time the house gets quiet, my brain starts replaying images, and it's not even specific scenes, it's the feeling of the movie. That grim, real, unavoidable sense of, what if? I keep thinking I'm going to open my eyes in the dark and see something. I keep bracing for a sound, a presence, a shift in the air. It's gotten to the point where I'm honestly worried about myself. Like, am I just overtired? Did I freak myself out so badly that my nervous system is stuck in fight or flight? Or did the movie press on something I've kept tucked away, and now I can't shut the door again? So I have to ask, because I feel a little alone in this. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever watched something and it didn't just scare you, it shattered you? Like it climbed into your life and wouldn't leave? Because that's where I am right now. And I hate how real it feels. Hey, thanks for letting me share this. It's been years since I've talked about what it was like growing up with whatever was in that old house. I'll say haunted just because it's the easiest word, but honestly, I still don't know where the line is between ghosts, weird phenomena, or something our brains can't neatly label. I just know what my family and I saw, heard, and lived through, especially from the mid-90s onward, when it started happening so often that it almost became part of the rhythm of our days. And I'm telling you all this for a couple reasons. 1, I'm still trying to make sense of it. 2, I want to know if anyone else has been through something like this. And 3, if I'm being really honest, some nights when I'm alone in the dark, I still get that familiar fear, like the air could shift and I'd be right back there again. I'd love to believe it was tied to that place and that it's not something that could follow me, or my kids. So, quick background. I was born in 1981, and we moved into this creaky farmhouse when I was about 4. It sat on land where there used to be a small cemetery, supposedly moved decades earlier to another part of town. The main part of the house dated back to 1902, and there'd been additions over time. The kind of house where every hallway creaks like it's clearing its throat. I was the oldest, girl, and I had 2 younger brothers. I'll call them Owen and Jude. And if you want my best guess, it never felt like just one presence. It felt like at least 3. A little kid kind of energy sometimes, mischief. A teenager vibe that felt restless. And then something older, heavier, harder to ignore. Anyway, out of everything that happened there, These are 3 moments that still stick in my bones. The toy boat, Christmas morning, 1990. So, Christmas morning, I woke up early, like kids do, and I heard this humming sound downstairs. Not a normal house sound, not pipes, not the heater. A steady, mechanical hum. Back then, being the oldest meant I was basically the second parent whenever the adults were asleep. So my first thought was, those boys got up and started playing without me. I marched down the hall toward Owen and Jude's room, already annoyed, ready to catch them in the act. But when I pushed their door open, both of them were out cold. Little kid sprawls, totally asleep. And the second I stepped back into the hallway, I heard the humming again. So I walked to the top of the staircase and looked down into the foyer. And I swear to you, without any hesitation, like it had intention, a little toy boat was gliding across the floor by itself. Not wobbling, not drifting, sliding like it was on a track. It went from one side of the foyer to the other and out of view. I just stood there, frozen. Then it came back the other direction. Same smooth motion, same hum. On the third pass, I took one step down and the stair creaked under my foot. The boat stopped, like it heard me. It stopped dead in the middle of the entryway, right under the staircase, as if it had been caught. I made it halfway down before my mom suddenly leaned out from the hallway below, sharp and urgent, and said, "Stop! Don't come down!" I nearly fell through my own ribs. She scared me so badly I sat down right there, clinging to the banister. My parents came out together, went right to the boat, picked it up, flipped every switch, tried everything. Nothing. No hum, no movement, no power. And later, this is the part that makes my stomach drop even now, we realized the boat didn't start again because it didn't have batteries in it. At all. Empty compartment. The Visitor. Late summer, 1993. This one is harder to tell. It still makes me feel small. It was about a month after my 12th birthday, and we were in the middle of this awful heat wave. The house held heat like a trapped animal. That night, I brought a glass of water to my room and left it on my nightstand because I kept waking up thirsty. I don't know what time it was, but I woke up suddenly, wide awake, with this pressure on my legs. Like something heavy had settled across my shins. I blinked and looked down, but I couldn't see anything. And then that pressure started moving. Slowly. Crawling upward. It slid up my body, and then, in this terrifying, deliberate way, it pinned my wrists down beside my head. Like hands holding me, but invisible. I tried to scream, like I really tried, but no sound came out. My mouth opened, my chest strained, and it was like the air refused to carry my voice. I fought, I thrashed, and whatever it was shook me, hard, against the mattress. Not like a dream, not like a twitch. Violent, controlled motion. For one panicked second, I thought, earthquake. I grew up in California, so that fear is wired in. But then I looked at the glass on my nightstand. The water was perfectly still. No ripple, no tremble, which meant it wasn't the room shaking. It was me. Somehow, pure adrenaline, pure survival, I broke free enough to finally get sound out. I screamed. And right after that, Owen screamed too. My parents came rushing, and all of us met in the hallway near the stairs. We could hear Owen crying from inside his room. When we got to him, he was sitting up in bed, shaking, sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe right. And what we pieced together, over that night and into the morning, was this. My scream had woken him up. He sat up, confused, and then he saw a dark figure rush past his doorway from the direction of my room. And as it moved through, it turned, just briefly, and he said it looked right at him. Then it went through his room and straight out through the wall, like the wall wasn't even there. That experience messed him up for weeks. He started stuttering afterward, just from the shock of it. And me, I couldn't stand sleeping alone. I slept in my brother's room for months after, squeezed into a bed with Jude, because the thought of whatever had been on me, I couldn't bear it. I still can't, honestly. The Shadow, 1995. By the time I was 14, I'd lived with enough weird that I wasn't as easily startled. But this night was pure primal fear. I woke up with that unmistakable feeling of being watched. You know what I mean? Like your body recognizes eyes on you before your mind catches up. I was lying on my side with the blanket pulled up, and I could feel something behind me, near my shoulder, and also this sense of presence at the foot of my bed. I wanted to roll over. I couldn't. It was like fear had glued me in place. After a few seconds, maybe longer, time does strange things in moments like that. I forced myself to sit up, and there it was. A shadowy figure standing about 3 feet from the foot of my bed. Not huge, roughly my height, maybe 5 foot something. Human-shaped, but not detailed. Like darkness that had decided to take a person's outline. I stared at it, heart hammering, and something in me snapped, like I was tired of being hunted in my own room. So I yanked my feet back out of reach and I told it, out loud, to get the hell out of my room and never come back. And the craziest part? It listened. It didn't rush me. It didn't react with anger. It just sank. Like wax melting. Like ink soaking into paper. It faded straight down through the floor and vanished. And I sat there shaking, thinking, did that really just work? Her words were so clear, I can still hear them exactly. There's something black coming through the ceiling. And yeah, my parents' bedroom was directly beneath mine. So whatever had been standing at the foot of my bed wasn't just in my room. It was moving through the house like it belonged there. That farmhouse gave me a whole childhood full of moments like that. Those are just 3 that stayed sharp, but there were so many more. And I guess what I'm asking you, if you've made it this far, is, does that sound like ghosts to you? Or something else? And if you've lived through anything like this, please tell me. Even if it's just to say, yeah, I believe you. Because part of me still wants to know it was tied to that place, and that it can't reach out from the dark and find us again. Okay, so before I get into the main thing, I kind of need to give you a little context, just so you understand why this shook me as much as it did. I grew up with a lot of weird stuff around me. Like, a lot. And the house I've lived in for most of my life doesn't exactly help. It's this ancient, half-falling apart place. Like, I'm pretty sure it was the first house ever built in our little neighborhood. Before everything got developed, it used to be part of a dairy farm, and the newer houses were basically built around what used to be its land. The locals used to joke that our place was the haunted house. You know the kind. Creaky floors, rooms that always feel colder than they should, the whole vibe. And over the years, I've had things happen that I genuinely couldn't explain. Hearing my name when no one was home. Little objects not being where I left them. Electronics turning themselves on. That heavy, watched feeling. I even used to catch these shadowy shapes in the corner of my vision every few days, like they were familiar somehow. And there was a stretch of time when my mental health was really bad, and a close friend, his name was Jonah, passed away, and everything around that period felt even more intense. But eventually I talked myself out of it. I told myself it was grief, stress, my brain spiraling, the house settling, old wiring, anything. I basically decided, okay, you were in a dark place. You were seeing patterns that weren't real. And honestly, I got better. I'm in a much healthier place now than I was back then. I'm still open-minded about weird stuff, afterlife, energies, whatever. But I'm not out here trying to convince myself everything is paranormal. Alright, so that's the background. Here's what actually happened. A couple weeks ago, I ordered this super cheap Ouija board. Not because I wanted to use it, more like aesthetics. I've got this dark, moody room theme going on, and it felt like the kind of creepy decor piece that would look cool on a shelf. It arrives, I unbox it, and I just leave it on my desk like, I'll deal with you tomorrow. Later that night, I'm sitting at the desk watching spooky videos, because apparently I don't value peaceful sleep. And one of those Ouija board clips pops up. And I don't know why I did this. Boredom, curiosity, stupidity, all of the above. I grab the board and I'm like, laughing at myself, like, okay, if there's a ghost here, say hi. The funniest part? It didn't even really come with a proper planchette. The little handpiece thing was this rough, cheap wood, like it was cut out with a butter knife. It didn't glide at all. You couldn't smoothly move it even if you tried. So I'm sitting there thinking, even if Ouija boards were real, there's no way anything could communicate through this busted piece of plywood. Still, I did the whole goodbye thing. I remember that clearly. Like, I didn't want to be reckless. I said goodbye, I ended it, and then I tossed the board up on the shelf above my bed, almost like a display. The handpiece went with it, sitting right on top like a little trophy. And that's where it gets hard to talk about. That night, I had a seizure. And I need you to understand, I have never had anything like that in my life. Not once. No history. Nothing even close. My eyes kept rolling back, like I was fighting to keep them forward, but losing. I could feel myself choking, like my tongue wasn't where it was supposed to be, like my throat wasn't cooperating. I kept slipping in and out of consciousness, and at the time I thought it was sleep, but looking back, it felt more like I was blacking out over and over. When it finally stopped, when I finally fully came back, I was just lying there buzzing. That's the only word for it. My whole body was humming like it had been electrocuted. I felt unbelievably weak, like my bones were made of wet paper. And there was this pressure on me, like something heavy was draped over my entire body, like one of those massive water-soaked blankets you can't push off. In the morning, the first thing I did, without even really thinking, was move the board. I took it off the shelf and put it away from the bed, and I separated the handpiece from it because I realized it had been resting right on the goodbye section of the board the whole night. I know that sounds small, but it bothered me so much I couldn't ignore it. Like it mattered. Like it was incorrect. I ended up going to the ER because obviously, what the hell? They ran tests. They checked everything they could, and they didn't find anything. No clear reason. No explanation they could point to with confidence. Just nothing. And I'm not saying I was possessed. I'm not saying some demon climbed into my spine because I bought a tacky decor board online. I'm not trying to make it that. But I can't shake the timing. I can't shake the feeling. Ever since then, my sleep has been awful. Not just I'm stressed awful, like my body doesn't trust the room anymore. And I keep catching myself staring at the shape of that shelf on the opposite side of the room, where the board used to be, like I'm waiting for something to move in the dark. I keep getting this same sensation I used to get when I was younger. That drowning, creeping, something is wrong feeling. The kind I convinced myself was just anxiety back then. And now there's this guilty feeling in my gut, like I messed up. Like I opened something I didn't mean to open. Even though, logically, I know how ridiculous that sounds. I don't even know what I want from telling you this. Maybe I just needed to say it out loud to someone who'll actually listen. Maybe it's a warning, like don't mess with things you don't take seriously, even as a joke. Or maybe it's just me being scared and trying to give that fear a shape. But I swear to you, ever since that night, the room feels different. And I hate that I'm even saying that, because I worked so hard to convince myself I was past all of this.